What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to a bi-week edition of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and that is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app and or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, I am joined by one of my favorite recurring guests here on the show, who will be joining me in a short while to get into the state of the Buffalo Bills at the bye week here. I see a couple comments already coming through in the live chat. I'm going to reiterate this a ton through the show, but questions, thoughts, comments, concerns. We're always very engagement heavy here on Disguise Coverage, but especially in a bye week episode where this team currently sits at an underwhelming 6-6 and 10th in the playoff picture in the AFC. I really want to get as many thoughts from you folks as possible. So anything and everything, whether it's on the topics that myself and my guests will be, getting into tonight and diving into, or if it's something that's on your mind, if it's positive, it's negative, if it's a review piece, if it's a thing for the future, if it's something specifically for the bye week, coaching, player, on field, off the field, anything and everything. I'm going to continue to reiterate that message throughout the show, but anything and everything you got, throw it up into the chat. I'd like to make this episode, as we do all episodes here, very engagement heavy. But this one especially, just given the state of where this team is, where we are in the bye, and just there's specific topics we're going to get into tonight. Specifically, what to make of Sean McDermott, evaluating Von Miller. I feel like both of those pieces, given where this team currently is and the loss the kind of loss that they had against Philadelphia, and coupled with the losses that they've had this year, and then the performance from Von Miller, I think it's a good time to kind of have an evaluation conversation when it comes to Sean McDermott, what his rest of the season looks like, what his potential future looks like, what Von Miller has been this year, what he could be coming out of the bye week, and just really getting into the nitty-gritty of what he's actually been based on the tape and based on some of the numbers. Then we're going to dive into, what needs to be improved / what needs to be fixed coming out of the bye week for the Buffalo Bills to make the playoffs. Again, they're sitting at 6-6. They are in a muddy AFC. There is still, all hope is not lost for this team to make the playoffs. So they do have to clean some things up, and then they're at a spot where they have to get some help with the teams ahead of them, and having the hard schedule that they have does not help. So it's going to be a really interesting piece for this team going forward. And I see a bunch of comments in the chat already. And like I said, wanted to start bringing up some of those pieces and continue to reiterate that message. So again, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, whatever you folks have in the chat. Or, for those of us joining live, throw it up in the chat, whatever you got. Also, if you are so kind and or so inclined, please drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So if you are here live, or you're watching post live and you're enjoying this content, or if you have enjoyed any of the content ever, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. It's greatly appreciated by myself and the entire team. Also, somebody downvoted this episode before it even went live, like a half hour ago. So that's also terrible. So good times for that. I'm going to work backwards with some of the comments in the chat. So Pops Mafia says, so you're saying there's a chance? There's absolutely a chance. I don't think there is any team, and we're going to get into it as we go forward, but I don't think there's any team left on this Bills schedule that the Bills cannot beat. And, for as painful as that loss to the Philadelphia Eagles was and still is, the Bills outplayed one of the best teams in football for the heavy majority of the game. Now, there is no moral victory and no silver lining within that, but the Bills are a really good football team. The issue is they play down to certain teams, they play up to certain teams, and you kind of don't know what you're going to get week in and week out. But this is a team that absolutely can beat the Chiefs, can beat the Cowboys, can beat the Chargers, can beat the Pats, and can beat the Miami Dolphins. They easily could win out and be 11-6, and we'll see where that puts them. So there is most definitely a chance. And I think that goes along to Derek's question as well, saying, can they make it? They absolutely can. Now, the road is not easy, and they've left themselves very little margin for error. And again, like I mentioned before in the intro, not only I'm not going to sit here and say that they have to win out, but they probably should win out, and then they need help from the teams ahead of them. Now, some of them teams are going to start to play each other. You hope that the AFC North can kind of continue to take away some games from the Browns and from the Steelers. And I know the Steelers' schedule is kind of weak and they do have a really good defense. Maybe they potentially sneak in still, but the Browns, even though their defense is tremendous, with the injuries they have on offense, you're hoping they continue to drop some games. The Texans and the Broncos play each other this week. It's crazy how that Broncos loss might now affect the playoff spot. There's so many things to go through, but yeah, they most definitely can make it. Roy says, Ant, how do you feel about CM Punk's return? CM Punk is like such a kind of awful person, it seems now. I did tune in last night to see what his speech was going to be on Raw. And I'm hoping they really lean into him being a heel and just healing it up as kind of like the anti everything he's ever been, because his message just rang so hollow considering what he said when he came to AEW a couple years ago and all the speeches he's made and what he's done and how much he's bashed WWE. So I hope they lean into that a bit in terms of his character, but he doesn't really move the needle much for me in the ring anymore. And he's such a black kind of person that seeing him disappoints me, but I am interested to see, where this storyline goes with him. I know he's supposed to feud with Seth Rollins, so we'll see what happens. I like that comment, Roy. And again, I mean, he helps make money. I mean, I don't watch WWE regularly, and I tuned in last night to see what he was going to do. So fair point. I like this from RJ. He said, this season made me a sad panda. Solid South Park reference. And I'm also glad that Chris716 recognized it. Let's start with the first comment that came in live here. And this is going to be one of the pieces we talk about in this show. I'm going to get into it in a bit. And then myself and my guest, when he joins us shortly here, I'm sure we'll rehash it. But Phil says, I think McDermott needs to go. The way he handled Diggs at camp, Dorsey, coaching decisions, and the way he handles Cook. He's a great defensive coordinator, but I think he has shown what he can/can't do as a head coach. I think it's fair to have that notion or that thought. I'm going to bring this comment back up when we specifically get into Sean McDermott. It's one of the topics here. I'm going to break it down in a bit, or my thoughts on it, but I think that's a fair point. And then John coming saying McDermott isn't going anywhere. I think that's the big piece that kind of looms large over the entire McDermott conversation is, and I said it a couple weeks ago, I believe, and I said it on another show too. I don't know if it was here or if it was on a guest appearance or another team. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I really feel like things have to go off the rails significantly for Sean McDermott to get fired. And that's not me saying I don't think he should get fired. That's not me saying, he's doing a great job. That's not anything. I'm just talking about the actual brass tacks of Terry Pagula sitting there going, you know what? Sean needs to go. I think things would have to be an absolute dumpster fire of an end coming out of this bye week for Sean McDermott to get fired. And I think that's the big piece. Again, we're going to dive into it in terms of what to make of Sean McDermott and who he is as a coach, who he's been, what he could be going forward, yada, yada, what a new head coach means, all of that, so on and so forth. But again, the piece looming large over all of it is whether or not any of that conversation is a moot point. And it probably is, because I don't know if Terry Pagula is sending Sean McDermott anywhere anytime soon. Again, for me, it would have to be something drastic. Like they have to lose out almost, and they have to get wrecked in every game. Like they have to look like an incompetent football team and a team where Sean McDermott has, that phrase kind of quote unquote lost the locker room. Like players have to show that they don't want to play for him anymore. Things have to go off the rails, or it could be something as simple as a behind the scenes thing where Josh Allen walks into Terry Pagula's offices and is like, hey, I hate Sean McDermott. I want him out. I don't think that's going to happen either, but that's the piece in the larger conversation. And I like this. And then Phil asked John why, and John says he has every excuse in the book for why this is a bad season. I also think, again, not to give McDermott a pass, even the struggles with the offense, everything, if this defense doesn't suffer the significant injuries they did with Milano and Daquan and Trey White, even though Trey White wasn't 100% the Trey White of old, the all-pro Trey White, he was getting there bit by bit. If they don't have those injuries, I don't like playing this game, the if-then game, or, if this didn't happen, then this means this, but I really don't think this is a 6-6 football team. That defense was so complete and so tremendous. And the skill sets that McDermott was able to lean into and tap into, man, even with the struggles on offense, they really were a tremendously complete football team. And those injuries just kind of eliminated some of their playmaking ability on the defensive side. And absolutely, he's got some kind of baked in excuses with that, in addition to, a multitude of others, like you mentioned there, John, but that's a fair point. Jack says, guys, it's very simple. If the Bills go 7-10, McDermott is gone. If the Bills finish 10-7 or better, he's staying. 7-10 might do it, but it's got to be a bad 7-10. Like they have to get housed. Like they have to look again like an incompetent football team. I don't know if the record enough is going to get him out the door. I also don't think, not to jinx it, I don't think they're going to go 7-10. That's a fair point. Oh, this comment from Aiden kills me. Imagine telling yourself in the past that the Bills upgrading to a top 5 performing O-line would equal the worst record. So I recognize the stats. I just want to give the caveat of I don't think the Bills have a top 5 offensive line. But to your point here, man, the improvement on the offensive line this year versus last year, the addition of Connor McGovern, the insertion of Osiris Torrance into this lineup, Spencer Brown, they've helped him a bunch this year. He's gotten a lot of support with chip help from tight ends, running backs, and even from Osiris Torrance. But Spencer Brown has played better. I really, that's a huge gut punch to me. And I think about it all the time. One of my biggest concerns for this team was the offensive line. And they got significantly better in pass protection and as a running football team. They are good on the ground with this offensive line. And even though they may lose some one-on-one individual pieces like they did against the Philadelphia Eagles this past Sunday, because the Eagles are loaded up front in a variety of ways, man, if you told me the Bills offensive line would not be a concern and they would be a plus in 2023, my mind would have thought, oh man, I can't see where the Bills are. How are they losing this game? It just goes to show how much the inefficiency on offense and the poor puck luck with the turnovers and the injuries on defense and how everything is just, I keep saying it, all these little tiny breadcrumbs have gone wrong. And when you put them all together, it leads to this giant puzzle of 6-6. And it's just, it's been so unfortunate to see. Oh, seeing this comment here from Pop saying, what did the Eagles fans say that made the D-line man? I didn't dive into it too much. I know there's that video of Jordan Phillips pushing that fan, and the fan denies anything, and so do people in the section. There was something with Shaq Lawson too. I didn't get into it as much. Mondays and Tuesdays are hell for me in terms of getting through the tape and analyzing everything from the game, so I don't dive into too much off the field stuff. But if anybody wants to put it in the chat, feel free. Comment here from Steve. The bye may have come at a perfect time. I am sure there's a lot of self-evaluation and soul-searching going on with both coaches and the players. We will see who they are the next 5 games. I love this comment from Steve, and this isn't me going with the whole pie in the sky thing or optimism thing or McDermott apologist type of thing at all. I don't know how to quantify it, but there's a realistic chance that the Bills, who are still a very good football team, I know it doesn't feel that way because they're 6-6 and they lost to the Broncos and they lost to the Patriots. This is still a good football team that can go toe-to-toe with anyone. It's realistic that the Bills course correct some things. Now, there are going to be pieces they cannot fix. They're not going to get better at linebacker because of the injuries. They're not going to get better on the defensive line because of the injuries. There's certain pieces where they are not going to improve, and it is what it is. But there's a realistic chance that the Bills course correct and, to use Steve's verbiage here, go through some self-evaluation and soul searching. And there's a chance they come out of this bye week and they're a force to be reckoned with. And they go into the playoffs at 11-6 and potentially maybe get some returning players from injury. And they're that team that got into the wild card that nobody wants to play. Different stylistically, but there's a chance the Bills go into the playoffs as that kind of Baltimore Ravens teams early on in Joe Flacco's days, where they were they weren't winning the division because they wouldn't get past Pittsburgh, but they were always the wild card and they were always going to the divisional round or the AFC Championship, and nobody wanted to play them. And even when they lost in the playoffs, they were a really hard out. The Bills could be that team. Not, again, different stylistically in terms of how those Ravens teams were built and how this Bills team is built. But yeah, this bye comes at a time where you really get to kind of see what's what, and a little baptism by fire for this coaching staff, for the players. You have a gut-wrenching loss in Philly against one of the best teams in football that you outplayed for a significant portion of the game. You have a miscommunication in overtime that was on Josh Allen. I'm not going to get into it right now, but you have a miscommunication in overtime between Josh Allen and Gabe Davis that doesn't lose you the game, but kind of lost you the game. You have all those horrible penalties that were called against you and the missed field goals, the sidewinder, crazy 59-yard field goal in the wind and the rain from Elliott that goes in, that sends it to overtime. All these pieces. You can come out of that game and come out of this bye week stronger. Again, I hate using it and because I don't like to do the whole silver lining and moral victory thing because there are none. It's very much wins and losses in the NFL, but You can make the case that the Bills come out of this team or come out of this bye week stronger as a team and just run through everybody at not dominating, but run through in terms of winning everything down the stretch. And they go win 5 out of 5 and they go 11-6. There's also a chance that they lose to the Chiefs, lose to the Cowboys, could lose to the Dolphins. So it's going to be a toss up and it's going to be so interesting. That's funny from Ralph. Ralph saying the NFL Network is replaying the Hockey Lee heist right now. Yeah, Hockey Lee had an interesting game as the ref for the Bills, and also has like a history of being tied as like the ref of the Eagles with some stuff. I saw what Warren Sharp retweeted. Just man. Oh, RJ says I have CM Punk stories. Not a good guy. RJ, let's table this conversation for another time, but I would appreciate it if you would not mind, or if you're willing to share, and if you're not, that's completely understandable. Please DM me. I love behind the curtain, peek into the real world of wrestling things, both in terms of like who they are and what goes on behind the scenes. So if I could DM you and we could have some chats, that would be awesome. I appreciate you. As always, RJ, thank you very much. Andrew, question from Andrew saying, who is more culpable for the lack of executing reads like the missed touchdown in overtime? So I know this has been a bit of a hot button topic. I haven't been on Twitter a bunch the past couple of days. Again, just is how the starts of the week always go chaotically for me. But especially after a loss, like Twitter is just so toxic. But I did see some of the conversations working their way through in terms of who to blame for that incompletion between Josh Allen and Gabe Davis. From my vantage point, and this is what I thought ahead of time, and then I also saw Eric confirm some things within the brand and then out in the Twitter sphere. So my initial thought, and this is what I believe now after watching the tape and having some conversations and things, it's on both to a degree. And I know Joe Brady kind of fell on his sword as well. But that to me is more on Josh Allen. You have to read the leverage of the defender. And I know a lot of people are saying, no, it's on Gabe Davis. It's a cover zero blitz. There's no one in the middle of the field. You're just supposed to run to the daylight, go to the middle of the field. That's it. The Eagles execute a pass off. Technical word for it, banjo. So if you've got, an inside corner and an outside corner, inside receiver and outside receiver, inside goes with inside, outside goes with outside. But if the receivers cross with one another, the defenders can either go with them and cross, or you can stay where you are. And the outside corner takes the inside receiver who is now outside. The inside corner takes the outside receiver who is now inside. That's called a banjo. Fancy word for just passing off coverage. That's what the Eagles do on that overtime play. So Gabe Davis reads that. He's the outside receiver. So he comes inside. He sees the leverage and he hits that corner. He runs to daylight, which is running that corner route. Josh Allen has to see that. The protection was there. The time was there. I think Allen is more culpable on that overtime incompletion than Gabe Davis is. And I know some people throw it at Joe Brady saying, why are we running option routes at that time? So on and so forth. And again, it's a muddied piece. I do believe Josh Allen was more culpable. Just because, again, you have to read the leverage of that corner, which Gabe Davis does. Josh Allen did not. So he didn't really kind of finish through the read or go through the read and kind of let that piece play out. Again, at the end of the day, it's a miscommunication. He thought one thing, Gabe Davis thought another. But if I had to say who was more culpable, I would say Josh Allen. Fair comment there. Jack saying, I looked at every team's schedule. The Texans are getting in. The Colts scare me because the schedule is easy, but they can lose to anyone. We need the Browns to fall apart, and that's very possible. It's crazy. The Colts are sitting there at 6-5 with Gardner Minshew. But to your point, actually, let's do that piece right now. So if we're looking at the schedule, looking at the Houston Texans schedule, they meet the Broncos this week, and then it's the Broncos, the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, the Titans, the Colts. So it's nice that they play the Colts. It's nice that they play the Browns, potentially maybe eat each other a little bit. Maybe they, drop one to the Titans. But yeah, the Texans are still a young football team. I've actually really liked watching a bunch of Texans tape this year, offensively and defensively. And I'm also pumped because they were my dark horse pick in the offseason to be better, like being the team that was going to do way better than anyone gave them credit for. And I like what they did during the offseason of the draft, and I like D'Amico Ryans. But they're still a young team. They're still a new team trying to figure out how to win football games and consistently do things. I could see the Texans continuing to play good football, making the playoffs. I could also see them faltering a bit. But to your point, yeah, like the Texans have a somewhat easy schedule. What's nice is they do potentially have games where they're going up against other teams that are in that playoff mix ahead of the Bills. So again, that game against the Colts, the game against the Browns, we'll see how things continue to shake out. Yeah, but Colts are in a similar position in terms of, they can lose to anybody, but like they also seem like they can beat anyone. They play the Titans, the Bengals, the Steelers, so that's nice. You get a Steelers Colts matchup, but then Falcons, Raiders, Texans. Yeah, the Colts schedule is cake. Like they could easily beat the Titans, but they could lose to the Titans. They could beat the Bengals or lose to the Bengals. They could beat the Steelers or lose. Same thing with the Falcons. Even the Raiders are playing a little tough. And yeah, you can do that for almost every team that's ahead of the Bills. It is absolutely blah. Jack saying if the Broncos lose this week to the Texans, they'll lose 7 out of 8. Ooh. Pop saying, did McDermott bench Cook or was that a Dorsey decision? I don't think it depends on when you're going through. I think Cook was definitely benched with the fumble piece against Denver. I don't think he was benched this week. I think it was just rotational based with what they were doing with Murray and Ty Johnson. I also think we have to be careful with the whole benching verbiage. Like there's times where the Bills just rotate personnel groupings and players based on situation, based on alignment, down and distance, where they are on the field, a whole bunch of situational pieces. So I think we have to be careful where, and I'm not saying you're saying this, Pops, but I know like I've seen that conversation circulating on the brief moments I've spent on Twitter this week. I think we have to be careful with the whole like benching piece versus, okay, he's just out for a drive or he's out for a couple plays because they want to run this look and Murray is better at it. And especially too, now that Ty Johnson is getting work from Joe Brady and Ty Johnson has actually looked pretty good. Now that Ty Johnson's in the mix, there's more of an opportunity for James Cook to, not be on the field, which then leads to questions. But I don't think there was a benching of Cook in this past game. I also think the bigger conversation is seeing how productive Murray and Ty Johnson have been. It goes to that further conversation of why ever spend an early draft pick on a running back when you can literally just pick up guys off of waivers and free agency that no one seemingly wants, and they can come in and just do a bunch of work. I like where Lauren's head is at. Lauren says, going to need more trees to cheer me up. Cue up the Adam Driver more image. I love that's a great gift. That's a tremendous gift from Star Wars. Yeah, but I only got the 2. Got the big old holiday tree that's still decked out in Thanksgiving garb. It'll be changed over once we're fully into December next week, full on Christmassy. And then got the little tree that stays up all year round, also in Thanksgiving garb that'll be changed as well. Pop saying the trip to London and the injuries on that field derailed the Bills' season. Jones, Milano, and Knox. I don't put Dawson Knox's injury in the same tier of importance as Daquan Jones and Matt Milano, but absolutely those injuries had a significant impact. Charles saying you can't just say fire McDermott without a real replacement plan. He's a good coach, and you don't just move on unless there's a clear plan in place. Michael saying unless McD loses Josh in the locker room, he's going to do enough to survive a bad season. I don't want my owner to react like an emotional fan. Look at Carolina if you want that. Ooh, very interesting. Very interesting. I think with that piece, let's dive into that Sean McDermott conversation, which is a bullet point I wanted to get. I see other comments coming through. I'm going to start to bring them up and answer some things once my guest joins us shortly. I like this. I do like this from Michael saying, when in the offseason are we going to get an Aunt RJ and Nate Tice wrestling pod? Not that I care about wrestling anymore, but I listen to stories. I've talked to Nate about it. Never seriously, but I feel like he'd be about it. So we'll see. Offseason is a dead time. We'll see what can happen. I like this comment too from RJ saying, no, absolutely. I have a ton of wrestling stories like that. A lot of guys are good, but some are not, ... Like good old Phil, CM Punk Brooks. Let's have the Sean McDermott conversation. Again, I see a bunch of the comments that are there. I'm going to circle back and grab a bunch of pieces as my guest joins in, and we'll answer some. I'll bring them up, just acknowledge a bunch of things, but I do want to get to some of these points. Let's talk about Sean McDermott. And for everybody in the chat, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything you got on Sean McDermott. You want him out. You want him to stay. Here's who you want to replace him. Here's why you think he should stay. Here's why you think he should be out. Even if it's just an emotional reaction, feel free to put it into the chat. But like the couple comments I brought up from Michael and from Charles, like the replacement plan piece for Sean McDermott is the big conversation. And again, I want to preface all of this by saying I am fine if Sean McDermott stays. I am fine if Sean McDermott goes. I think there are merits to both sides of the conversation, and I think you can make a case either way. Like I'm not firmly in one camp or the other. I'm usually fantasy football wise, on the field pieces, anything and everything. I am for the most part a, mitigator of risk. And when you look at Sean McDermott, amongst active coaches, including the playoffs, he's currently ninth in win percentage at 610 amongst all the 32 head coaches in the NFL right now. He's 72 and 46, 4-5 in the playoffs. He's made the playoffs six out or 5 out of 7 seasons. We'll see what happens this year. Again, like I said, I'm fine if he stays, fine if he goes. My biggest thing with all of it is, and this isn't me trying to kind of, impose fear or worry or fit a narrative or anything like that. But the grass isn't always greener on the other side, especially when it comes to coaches. And there's just as much potential risk as there is potential reward in removing Sean McDermott and bringing in a new head coach. Now, if you think Sean McDermott is a known quantity at this point, and that known quantity is worth risking for an unknown quantity at head coach, that's fine. Cool. Do you? But I think the conversation, we need to stop acting like a new coach is this guarantee for the team to be better. I keep seeing the names floated out, and some of them I really like. Like, I think Ben Johnson is a fun name, from an offensive side. I think, I know everybody wants an offensive guy, but I think the idea of Lou Anarumo, Bengals defensive coordinator, would be a fun head coach idea. Like, all these pieces. I even thought of it last year. Like, I didn't think Sean McDermott was going anywhere, but there was part of me that was like, oh, you know what? Like, DeMeco Ryans would be a cool head coach. All these pieces. But there's no guarantee that a new head coach is a guarantee for a team to be better. Some guys are great with the X's and O's as a coordinator, offensively, defensively, but they're bad people managers. And so much of being a head coach isn't just the X's and O's. It isn't just the on-field piece. It's the off-the-field piece. How do you manage a locker room? How do you manage a team? How do you manage the offseason when it comes to scouting, when it comes to process and procedure and roster construction and philosophy and ideology? Some guys are great on the field. Some guys aren't off the field, and vice versa. Some guys know how to build a great staff. Some don't. And like I alluded to, there's all the organizational and philosophical changes that come along with a new regime where even if they're good in the long run, sometimes they're growing pains in the short term. So what if you get a new head coach who is going to be awesome in 2026, but then you're kind of burning away 2024 and 2025 as the organization kind of retools and or refits based on again, ideology or philosophy in terms of on the field execution and or off the field roster construction, just all these little points. There's so many variables. There's so much both on and off the field that goes into winning, and the variables attached to that makes it no guarantee either way. There's no guarantee that keeping Sean McDermott alleviates the struggles that we see. They're just like there's no guarantee that removing Sean McDermott alleviates those. It's cool to want a new coach. It's cool to want Sean McDermott to stay, but either way, there are no guarantees. And even if you think, here's a piece too, right? Like, even though we have a decent sample size on who and what Sean McDermott is, there's still no guarantees that you can't win a Super Bowl with Sean McDermott. The example I've given a bunch on this show before, like there was so much of that conversation being had about Andy Reid until he won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. He got run out of Philadelphia. Eagles fans were like dancing in the street to get rid of Andy Reid. That Eagles organization waited until he had that one bad year. I think they had a bunch of injuries, but they went 5-11. He got axed, and everybody in Philly was dancing a jig because he was out. Then he goes to Kansas City. He still can't get over in Kansas City, to use a wrestling term there. He has Alex Smith. They lose to a Marcus Mariota-led Titans team in Kansas City in the wildcard round year after year. They could not get over the hump. Then he gets that perfect marriage with Patrick Mahomes, and now he's recognized as one of the greatest coaches in football today and one of the greatest football coaches of all time. So this whole narrative and conversation around Sean McDermott, it followed a similar path to what was going on with Andy Reid until he won a Super Bowl. Everyone is not clutch, and everyone needs to be replaced until they win a championship, and they're all of a sudden, kind of ironclad and this made man. But on the other side of the conversation, for every Andy Reid, there is a Marvin Lewis. There is a Marty Schottenheimer, a coach who continuously does a good job in the regular season, who puts his team in position to win a Super Bowl and contend and compete for a Super Bowl, but just for somehow or for some reason, somehow, some way, just cannot get his team over the hump in those playoffs. So my point with all of that is there is no guaranteeing that the next head coach is going to be an Andy Reid or a Marvin Lewis or a Marty Schottenheimer, one way or the other. And that's my piece with the whole conversation. Like it's all projection in terms of potential reward versus potential risk. And I'm not saying Sean McDermott should stay because it's better to have the devil you do than the devil you don't. I'm okay either way. McDermott can go, McDermott can stay. I just don't think it's this slam dunk, easy guarantee that the grass is greener on the other side if Sean McDermott goes. Now, again, if you think Sean McDermott is a known quantity and the potential risk of him going is outweighed by the potential reward, that's a whole thing. That's a whole nother conversation. If that's where you're at, I just hope we're not at this. I see so many concrete statements being made. I hope we're just not at this point where it's assumed that the Bills have a great team. Whoever you get in to bring, whoever you get to bring in as a head coach is automatically going to take this team to the next step. There is no guarantee either way. A new head coach could come in, the Bills could be better. A new head coach could come in, the Bills could be worse. You literally have no idea. It's all projection. And if you're confident in that projection, and I like this comment here from Greg saying Gary Kubiak, Pete Carroll, Bruce Arians, Bill Cowher, all coaches who people thought at one point would never win a Super Bowl. That's a fair point too. Bill Cowher is a great one. Could never get over the hump. And this isn't to say, Sean McDermott should stay. But there's such a fine line with this conversation. It really is like a fun debate to have when, I don't know, you're not coming off a loss and everybody wants blood in someone's head on a steak or a pike. But there is like a conversation to be had for, you have to be consistently good in order to have a chance at the Super Bowl. And that's what Sean McDermott has done with this Bills team. But also at a certain point, the goal is to win a Super Bowl. And is it cool every year to just, win your division and get to the Final Four in the conference if you're not going to win a Super Bowl? Or, would you rather take some swings trying to get that Super Bowl and be okay with the misses, right? And so John's saying here right now, it could literally be worse. It could be better. It could literally be worse. The Bills might flounder in mediocrity for the next couple of years. We've heard so much from players coming in. Emmanuel Sanders was such a great example, a guy who's been around multiple championship caliber teams. He's been to multiple Super Bowls, a guy who has been coached by tremendous coaches, played with tremendous players. Him coming in and talking about what the culture was and what the staff was like and how players were viewing the Buffalo Bills now. That's the reason that, again, hot button topic here, but that's the reason Von Miller came here. That's the reason Leonard Floyd came here. That's the reason the Bills have attracted some of these free agent pieces. Now, you can also play the other side and say, well, the Bills have Josh Allen. Players will come to play with Josh Allen, so on and so forth. But it's a whole mitigation risk reward analysis when it comes to getting rid of Sean McDermott or keeping Sean McDermott. You can make a case for either side. That's my whole piece with all of it. I am okay if Sean McDermott goes. I am okay if Sean McDermott stays. But if you think it's a guarantee and it's easy that whoever they bring in as a new coach is going to take this team to the promised land, there's the potential of that. There's also the potential that the next head coach runs this team into the ground and things go terribly and you're stuck chasing your tail in mediocrity and failure again. And as Bill says right here, these guys come here because of Josh Allen, not Sean McDermott. The player piece is there, but a lot of free agents that come in and these vet guys that come in, they talk about Sean McDermott. They talk about that culture piece. And I think it's more than just Josh Allen. Now, if players had to pick, I'm coming here because of Josh Allen or Sean McDermott, I think they're probably going to lean Josh Allen. He's a significant piece. But I don't think you can just completely mitigate or remove the impact of Sean McDermott and the culture that has been created within this organization and within the building and within the team. That was created by Sean McDermott. That is fostered by Sean McDermott. And for all the failures we see, a lot of times we're seeing guys kind of champion Sean McDermott and bang the drum for his leadership and the type of coach that he is. Again, this is me saying that as a non-biased, purely objective party. I'm fine if he goes. I'm fine if he stays. I just don't think the grass is always greener on the other side. The Bills could bring in Ben Johnson. Awesome. What happens if the Bills are, 5-12 next year? They could be 12-5. They could be 5-12. They could be a whole bunch of things, but there's no guarantee either way. That's the whole conversation starter and ender for me. And I like some of these pieces, the fun ideas. And sometimes new blood is nice, but man, you can get into a dangerous cycle when you think, going new is always better because it isn't necessarily the right move a lot of times. Now, for me, to kind of go within that, again, I don't think Sean McDermott's infallible. I would have, just from the Eagles game, I would like to have seen better timeout management and a shot for Josh Allen to win the game in the fourth quarter against the Eagles. I'm fine with the one timeout to kind of make sure everything's situated on that third down and make sure you're good to go. I know the icing the kicker timeouts statistically usually work. I'd still rather pocket those two timeouts and take a chance that, man, I don't know, like Allen can just gun one down the field and kind of get you close into field goal range. Now, on the other side of that conversation is also Tyler Bass was not very reliable in that game against the Eagles. So, if you want to go when, it's a moot point because a long field goal wouldn't have been made by Tyler Bass, yada, yada. I understand all those pieces. I still would have liked two timeouts in the holster and trying to use them to get down the field to attempt a game-winning field goal to end the game in the fourth quarter. Even with the one timeout left, I know it's still improbable. I still would have liked to take some kind of shot instead of just kneeling it. You never know. Throw it up. Maybe you get an egregious pass interference call, although the way that game was called, it probably wasn't going to work in the Bills' favor. So I don't like things like that just from in a vacuum against the Eagles. Again, I would have liked some better timeout management there. I also would have liked if Jake Elliott didn't hit a 59-yard sidewinder field goal in the wind and the rain. Like, that's still ridiculous. I thought it was going to hook and curve left, and then it hooked and curved right. I thought it was going to go past, and it went almost dead center right into that bottom right corner pocket at the end there. I think in general, I've always kind of had some level of blah or meh with Sean McDermott's in-game decision work at times, fourth down decisions, timeout management, challenges, and pieces like that. But philosophically and on the whole, again, he's arguably the most successful coach in franchise history with what he's done and the turnaround that he's helped engineer. And I just be wary of booting someone out the door because of a reactionary piece. And again, even within this game, this Eagles game, and I know this isn't just a one-game thing for everyone. I know everyone's not seeing this one loss to the Eagles and are saying, boom, fire Sean McDermott because of this one loss. I know it is a culmination and a multitude of things, but man, there are a whole bunch of little pieces that have happened in this year, in this season, that are not Sean McDermott's fault whatsoever. And if you get a couple of bounces that go your way, the Bills are, I don't know, suddenly 8-4 or suddenly 9-3 instead of 6-6. Again, you can make that case for any team at any point in any game. There's usually, I don't know, anywhere from 3 to 5 plays a game that turn the tide and change the stem of how things go. And again, it's a larger conversation piece. And I think there's just no guarantee either way. And I think with that being said, I'm going to bring in my guest at this time to kind of finish off this conversation piece. And then we're going to start some new topics and new things going forward. One of my favorite guests, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Kendall Mirsky, who again, off camera because I'm assuming he's in timeout and his parents took away his camera, but
precisely.
Conversation for another time. Kendall, I love you. You're fantastic. I appreciate you joining me for the second time in 3 weeks. And as you can see up there on the graphic and the conversation, we just got it maybe about 15 minutes ago, mainly due to the chat. There's been a lot of back and forth. Kendall, we're at this point of kind of what to make of Sean McDermott and kind of loop you in. My contention here has been, I'm fine if he goes. I'm fine if he stays. I just think we have to recognize the idea and the notion of a new coach coming in. It could be good. It could be bad. This Bills team could ascend and get better. They could fall off a cliff and be worse. It's all about how you value, Sean McDermott is a known quantity. And if you think that potential risk of bringing in a new coach outweighs, or is outweighed by the potential reward of bringing a new coach in. I also think there's something to be said for Sean McDermott still, even though, again, he's been with this team for a good chunk of time, still not being a known quantity, similar to what Andy was in his time with Philly, where he got run out there, still couldn't get over the hump with Kansas City until he got Mahomes. But then, again, I recognize the other side of that coin, where for every Andy Reid, you have a Marvin Lewis, you have a Marty Schottenheimer. My whole contention is, kind of put a nice little bow on it based on that is, I'm fine if he goes. I'm fine if he stays. I just don't think it's a guarantee in any way, shape, or form that the grass is greener on the other side if you bring in a new coach. considering all the on the field and off the field variables that exist, what it takes to make a team successful, it just seems like there's a lot of concrete statements and absolutes are being made when it comes to, well, get Sean McDermott out and bring Ben Johnson in. This team is going to take off. I just don't think it's that easy.
Yeah, it's a really complicated topic. I mean, I said it last time I was on, and I'm starting to notice maybe there's a trend that I'm only on here when we're talking negatively about Sean McDermott.
I
But
know, right?
but I do think it's really complicated because the grass isn't always greener, and that's not to say that, as Bills fans, or putting myself in Terry Pagula's shoes, you should be afraid of the unknown, because if you're afraid of change, like, you really can't grow. You have to give yourself that opportunity to either fail or succeed. And if
Mm,
you don't give yourself that opportunity, you're just going to stagnate. You're just
mm,
going to stick with the status quo and what has always been. That being said, there's an opportunity to stick with the status quo that is Sean McDermott and allow him to grow as a head coach. Like, he's only been a head coach since 2017. So he's going through all of these trials and tribulations.
mm.
I think the pushback is, of course, he's had so many moments to learn from mistakes. And
Yeah.
as a fan base, we're seeing there's no adjustment. And even when you're talking granularly to, a single game, I think that's been the frustration. You see this team go into football games with great game plans,
Mm,
especially defensively. And once the other team throws a counter, you don't really see the Bills defense with the ability to counter punch back. And I think that frustration has grown and kind of mounted among the fan base, to a point where it's like, this guy can't manage a game. And I honestly, truly, personally think it's being amplified a bit. I do think there are decisions that he could have made in this game in the past
mm,
that could have been better. But uh, for me, it really boils down to just the icing the kicker timeout for this game specifically.
mhm,
And then that from a game management perspective, right? Like timeouts, clock
mhm,
management,
mhm.
like that. But then an X's and O's schematic thing is really the ability to adjust, because I feel like that's been an issue for this defense for years. Once the offense figures you out, how are we going to figure out what they figured out?
I think that's a good point, and honestly, like, it echoes a lot of similar sentiments I had, before you hopped on. Like, in a vacuum, just that Eagles game, I was okay with that first time out, kind of, "Okay, let's make sure we're set for this 3rd down, let's
Yeah,
make sure we're right defensively," but I
turned
would have
into a
li
Poyer incompletion, or forced
Yep,
incompletion.
yep. A short throw underneath, Poyer, like, knocks it down, awesome. I was literally sitting there thinking, and I was, super funny, so I had, my mom had stopped over to drop some stuff off as the game started, and the Bills were doing well, and I was like, "You can't leave." She goes, "What?" And I was like, "You're not allowed to go, because if the Bills lose, I will blame you." So me, her, and my wife were sitting down there watching the game, and my wife had stepped out, and Poyer makes that stop, and I'm literally sitting there being like, "Oh, this is awesome." And
Yeah.
I'm literally sitting there telling my mom, I'm like, "Man, like, they're probably gonna have around 20 seconds, 2 timeouts. I'll take that if Allen can
Yeah.
wing it downfield, and we'll see what happens." And then he called timeout again, and I was like, "Okay, he'll still go after with 1 timeout." The kneel crushed my soul a little
Yeah.
bit. Like, watching him
Yep.
just come out and kneel it, that one got me a bit. Again, that's just in a vacuum. But in the larger picture, like you mentioned, and I said this again right before you came on, like, my issues with him have always been like the kind of the black or the meh with his in-game decision operations and
Yeah.
workings, whether it was sometimes with 4th down decisions, but for me, it was more timeout management, challenges, just certain decision making in the moment that I don't want to use the scared verbiage, because or when say like, well, he's coaching scared or he's coaching not to lose. And I do think there is some truth to it or some smoke to that fire a little bit, but
Yeah.
um, it's hard to really know for sure without being like in his brain. But my bigger thing with him, yeah, has been I have some roster building concerns that you and I talk about all the time via text,
Hmm.
but I think that's a conversation for another time, especially because it ties in with Brandon Beane. But yeah, I just think there is something there when it comes to his in-game decision making when it comes to big games and or big moments, specifically in the playoffs, because we've seen big regular season games where the victories that they've had against the Kansas City Chiefs, against I even think back to his first year against the Atlanta Falcons when this was a
Mm,
team that like nobody believed in and the Falcons were rolling. Like he had moments where he was managing the game correctly and just running this team beautifully. And it seems like he's faltered a little bit now. Then you go into the conversation like, okay, well, is it really him or is it more circumstantial? Is it player based? Is it Sean McDermott? But again, all of it is it's tied up in this muddiness of week in and week out, year in and year out. Again, this year kind of being an outlier to the conversation, but year in and year out, week in and week out, he's made this a very good football team. I saw that graphic that what is it like over the last like of all sports franchises, like over the last like 4 or 5 years or something like that. Like if the Bills and Chiefs are 1-2, Chiefs 1, Bills 2 in terms of like most wins or best winning percentage for franchises or something. Like this team year in and year out has been a Super Bowl contender,
right.
and Sean McDermott's been at the helm of it. But the other side of that conversation is what's it worth to consistently be in the fight if you don't think you can win the big fight in terms of a Super Bowl? And is it worth it to kind of chuck that to the side to take some swings at a Super Bowl if those swings include misses or bigger misses that you have with the known quantity of McDermott?
Yeah, I feel like the larger conversation is really just about how we feel about this franchise and where it's at in its life cycle. And specifically, I guess the roster too, because when McDermott was brought in, like, I mean, he did everything he had to do and he did it all the right way because it was so much about like culture. Just build a winning culture, build a mentality for a team that can believe that they can win football games. And he did that. I mean, he was kind of like the 2022 Giants where they overachieved. Like they should not have been good in 2017 and they were good. They overachieved from what they should have done.
I'm on mute. What a clown I am. This comment from Steve, and Steve says, unfortunately, a large part of McDermott's coaching tenure has been like
Yeah,
watching the
right.
TV series A Thousand Ways to Die.
But to be fair, that was like life as a Bills fan before McDermott
Oh,
as
forever. You
well.
true.
You
Yeah.
know, like it's
Yeah.
it's not even siloed to McDermott. I think the difference now is expectations, right?
Mhm.
Like McDermott has made a bed of expectations for Bills fans where it's like we
Yeah.
expect really good things from this team year in and year out because of largely what he did in 2017 and still finding some relative success in 2018 with a rookie quarterback and then everything that's happened since then. I mean, anything short of a Super Bowl is going to upset this fan base. And
Mm,
it's unfortunate, but it is the bed that he made. And let's be honest, it's the expectations he has for himself, anyways. So I
fair.
mean, really in terms of the life cycle thing, I think it's an interesting conversation of who McDermott is as a coach. And if he was hired, at the time by Pagula to be the guy that's going to end the drought. And I
Mhm.
think in that hiring process, they found a perfect character to be a
Mm,
leader of men, to change a culture, to establish a culture of winning. And it happened. But have we reached, the point of diminishing returns? Have we reached the
mm,
point where he's kind of capped in terms of his ability as a holistic head coach, where maybe that's his cap. His cap is that ability, and he maybe has limitations in other areas like in-game management, in-game adjustments. Like there are just so many things that a head coach needs to do. And I'm not even saying that he's like overwhelmed with like
mm,
being a defensive coordinator and a head coach this year. I'm
mm,
I'm kind of more so just saying like there's a lot of things, a lot of traits that a head coach needs to have to be successful,
mm.
and I'm a little worried that maybe he was brought in the first place to end a drought, and he's not necessarily growing with the life cycle of this team as it grows past the drought years.
That's a fair point. Like it's like you need there was a real comment, real good comment. I just pulled it up too from Chill Will who said, I think this was well said from him saying, I think Sean was good at getting us out of the ditch,
Right.
but I'm afraid he's got us as far as he could. I'm afraid the emotional attachment we've made with him is slowly making us okay with just being relevant. And I
Mm,
think but that's a potential like good point to note, especially in that first part. Like maybe he's the guy to kind of, get you on the road to recovery, but he's not the one to kind of take you up the mountaintop to that championship. But it's so. The one point I'm going to ask you a question about, what you think should be done with Sean McDermott. But before that, I want to just piggyback on the point that you made, like so many like things that are tied to the head coaching piece. And again, this is something I was talking about before you joined, like everything, like it's not just the on the field execution pieces. It's the staff you bring in. It's the culture you establish. It's the off-season rhythm that you put together. It's the scouting principles and team building philosophy that you have. There's so much that goes into it that is also part of that whole like unknown quantity with a new guy coming in. Like there's so many guys who are tremendous X's and O's people as coordinators, but they're horrible people managers. And that's why they don't work out as a head coach, or, the stress of being a head coach is too much for them because it's a significantly different job than just
Yeah.
being a coordinator. Even if you're not also calling, or designing one side of the ball, like even if you're just like a, John Harbaugh type of coach where you're not calling offense or defense, you're just the head coach. It's a tremendously different job than being a coordinator. And there's a reason guys flame out at that spot, or you have the opposite. You have guys who are tremendous people managers, but they're not good X's and O's guys. And so they flame out because of that. And players love playing for him, but they're 2-14 every year because he doesn't identify talent properly, or he's a horrible in-game manager, bad at X's and O's, yada, yada. There's a multitude of ways where a new coaching staff and new hire can go well for you. But I think there's an equal amount, if not more, ways where it can go sideways for you and turn out to be not what you ideally were looking for or ideally wanted. And I say all that to then get to this question, like I mentioned to you, like for you, again, like I've said, I'm fine with him going, with him staying. I recognize the pros and cons to both sides. Like I honestly do. Like I think, the positives of bringing in new blood, I see them. I also see the negatives. Just like I do with the positives and negatives of McDermott. Where do you sit and or stand on the Sean McDermott piece? Do you want him to stay? Do you want him to go? Are you fine either way and you recognize the merits of the conversation on both sides? Where do you sit when it comes to this whole like deal of Sean McDermott and what to make of him?
Oh,
Aside from the fact that I know we talked about it last time, like we don't think he's going anywhere unless like things completely fall apart and Terry
right.
completely jettisons him. But where do you sit on whether he should stay or go, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I definitely gonna go back to that point. Like, I think he deserves this season. Like, there's no shot in my mind, barring anything crazy, that he deserves to finish the season, because I think that's part of the evaluation. Like, seeing how this team fights through this adversity. I mean, adversity relative to expectations, and
Mm,
the tough schedule ahead. Like it will be really
yeah.
interesting to see exactly how they measure up to all of the opponents that are
They
for the rest of
realistically
their
could like
schedule.
they could win all 5 and go 11-6, or they could lose like 3 out of the 5 or lose even 4 out of the 5. Like it's
They could
wild.
lose all five. Like that's the
They could.
thing. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, personally, this is off track, but I think this Eagles game was the first time that they got beat by another team instead of beating themselves. I felt like they literally beat themselves in all five other
Yes.
losses this
Which is
year.
also part of the reason why like I'm not horribly on a ledge with this loss. Like I'm mainly annoyed because of the overtime miscommunication
Yeah.
and all the horrible penalty calls, the missed field goals,
Yep.
Elliott hitting a sidewinder 59-yard kick in the rain.
A
Like
lot of things happen. Like the
yes.
Eagles kind of deserved it in a lot of ways.
But see, and that's a point too. Like there are so many plays where like I was going back and watching the tape and it was just like, oh, they just had a guy who made a good play. Oh, they just had a good design on this play. Like, they're a good football team. They're well coached and they have
Exactly.
good players.
Exactly.
I came away from this game against the Eagles. Like, I was pissed at the way they lost, but not at the team. I was just like, oh,
Right.
like they
Same.
lost to a good football team.
But of course, it's a similar type of loss, so it gets bucketed in the same way and blame McDermott. But so back to my McDermott point, I think he deserves this season. I think it's a really fair way to evaluate where he is in this team's life cycle and if he can get them over that hump, or if
Mm,
that hump is just always going to be in front of them. But I see both sides. I'm a fence sitter on this. Like, I really don't think he deserves to be fired. I don't think he deserves to stay. I think he's on a warm seat. That's just the reality of it. He's on a warm seat, and every day is an evaluation for him. Whereas, like, rewind to the beginning of this season, I mean, outside of 13 seconds and Hail Murray, like, is there anything you're really mad at this guy for specifically? But you think about what happened this past Sunday, and all you can
mhm.
think about are all of those defensive drives where you need a stop and McDermott's defense couldn't get you a stop. Like, I can't right now think of, and this is just human nature, like confirmation bias, trying to find and support your priors,
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
but I literally, for the life of me, cannot think of a moment in Bills history since 2017 where the Bills have needed a defensive stop and they got it. But when I,
Falcons,
but when I,
2017
right,
against the
but
Falcons.
but this is my point. I look at the numbers and like I look at game logs and it's like, oh, it's happened, but I
Mm.
literally cannot think of it at the top of my head. You know what I mean? So it's, I think that's a lot of just the fan base and human nature, just like really digging into that confirmation bias of the emotions of the whole thing. But I really think either way the Pujols go on this, it's completely understandable. McDermott has earned the grace of seeing the season through, and even maybe next season through, especially considering the recent contract extension he just got. I just think he has earned that grace, but in the same time, he has earned just as much criticism, especially in this year alone. Like,
Mm.
not even barring the 13 seconds or Hail Murray or any of the stuff before that. So I truly am a fence sitter on this one.
You know what gets me too? I think about the um I was talking about this with my one buddy, like the so you have the Patriots game, the Broncos game, and this game now where the offense went, scored with like not a ton of time left on the clock, and the defense just couldn't close it out and either, not forcing OT or not, earning a loss. And it's so funny, like all three of those teams are in completely different tiers and have different offenses. Like the
Yeah.
Patriots suck and their
Yeah.
offense is terrible. And they're
Yep.
sitting there at 2-9 or whatever they are now. And you let them drive right down your throat. Granted, I know the caveat for some, like it should have been an ineligible man downfield on the first play, yada yada.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like
Whatever.
you shouldn't have given up more than 13 points to the worst offense in football that entire
Right.
game, even with all the injuries. You literally let them run down your throat for the majority of the game and do the one thing that you could not let them do. And then you get the Broncos, who have kind of righted the ship a little bit and are starting to kind of look like the team that people thought they could be last year and or this year even more so under Sean Payton as opposed to having Hackett last year. But still not a good football team. Still a team you should have beat. And then you give up a similar drive to the Eagles, who are in a complete different tier, one of the best teams in football, but just having all three of those losses against a variety of quarterbacks, a variety of offenses, in a variety of tiers. It's not like, oh, well, you know what? Like they get gutted late by teams that can pass the ball, or they get gutted late by mobile quarterbacks or teams that can run, I don't know,
No,
read option or
they're
whatever.
the
Like,
antithesis of the Eagles. The Eagles find ways to win.
ah,
The Bills will find ways to lose. It doesn't matter how, they will morph their way into it. They can be versatile in that way to find a way to lose a game. It's
and,
ridiculous.
and it's always kind of existed too. Like even because I was thinking back to your example of like, oh, when have they ever closing out? I think like, oh, they did it against the Falcons, and then I think back to I think it was a 2019 when they lost to the Browns. Like, granted, it was on a missed
Mm,
field goal at the end, but like the Bills go
yeah.
down and take the lead, I think like 16-12. And then Baker Mayfield puts them on like a 10-play, 82-yard drive in like 3 minutes or something. And they go up 19-16. And just like, yeah, like he just, for whatever reason, hasn't been able to fully close it out. And that's super disappointing. And I don't know if like him, it's also funny too, because this conversation of like, him not being able to show up in big moments as a head coach, it's funny that like not funny like haha, but funny like painful that makes me want to cry.
Hmm.
It's funny that those losses this year against the Patriots, against the Broncos, and against the Eagles have come like with the defense not being able to close out the game at the end, and it's being coached and run by Sean McDermott. It's like
Yeah.
a mini microcosm of his tenure, but also you have to kind of put the conversation together as well. Like, I don't know, he coached like a tremendous game against Philadelphia to start. And
Right.
then, but again, you have to talk about the lack of adjustments of what happened in the second half. But then in the others, like the other side of the coin too, with that Denver game, like the offense turned it over with some of the most ridiculous turnovers for the entirety of the game that put points on the board. Now, granted, that doesn't excuse them for breaking at the end of the game, but also like the defense was fine for the majority of it, even though it also kind of wasn't. It just sucks to be in this like chasing your tail muddiness in terms of trying to ascertain where the blame lies. And you
Mhm.
can legitimately make a case on both sides, no matter what your thought is.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. There isn't a clean answer. There isn't There isn't a finger to point at one person. I mean, you got to use all 10 hands to find blame. I mean, it's truly like there's so much blame to go around. It's very nuanced. And I mean, you get granular with it and you look at just the execution mistakes, and there's no one person to blame. Like, that's why you can't just sit here and blame McDermott. Like, there were plays to be had on the field, and there were
Yeah.
players that let the team down, and it wasn't one player, it was multiple players, and that happened the same way for the Eagles on the other side, but it all aggregates into the final score. That's
Like, are
just
we
part of football.
are we even having this conversation if Josh Allen reads the leverage of the DB in overtime and throws it to the corner for Gabe
Or if
Davis instead of throwing it to the
Tyler
middle?
Bass makes a couple of kicks, doesn't get blocked on a 34-yarder. Like,
Right?
they're little things, just that is football. And a lot of it isn't in the coaching, isn't in the hands of the head coach. I mean, specifically kicking is probably the most, like,
Bro.
the easiest thing to be like, that's player execution. There is nothing you can put on a head coach about kicking. Like, a 59-yarder being made and a 34-yarder being blocked, like, that is execution at its finest.
There's so many just, and I also feel like he's in a position where like he's damned if he does, like damned if he doesn't.
Yeah.
Like he plays soft coverage and everybody's upset because the coverage is too soft. He
Yeah.
brings a blitz and everybody's yelling at him for being stupid because he brought a blitz. Like, there's just so much now. I feel like with Sean McDermott, the fan base has lost, no pun intended, like the process of all of it, and is purely results based. Like,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
not that, well, the decision was sound, it just didn't work out the way you want. It seems like the majority of the fan base is purely like, nope, if this worked, it's amazing, regardless of if it's sustainable or should have worked or not. And if it doesn't work out, it sucks and this is terrible, regardless of how it should have gone or what the probability of it was. Like, everybody becomes so results based, which is understandable. And I think a lot of that ties into your initial point of it's the expectations now on the team, because with those expectations, there is less acceptance of error for the fan base. And when you
Mhm.
have less acceptance of error, you're not focusing on the process as much. You're focusing almost purely on the results.
Yeah, I mean, it's the NBA before Steph Curry happened. It's
Oh,
I mean, there aren't bad shots in the NBA anymore because if your efficiency is good, no one cares about how you got there.
mm,
And it's sad, but that's kind of the world we live in. It's an impatient world that is results driven, and that's kind of especially the football world we live in. But that's the reality of it. Yeah, it
especially in,
sucks.
in a playoff system where there is no, like we've talked about it before, there is no like, oh, we lost game one, best of seven or best of five, we'll come get it. No, it's single elimination. If you have a bad day or there's bad weather or you got significant injuries that week or somebody, your main guy is sick and isn't up to snuff and you lose, you're done and everybody's coming for your throat.
Yeah, yeah. It's really tough, and I hate to be in this position, but that's the position we're in. We just kind of have to wait and see how he handles the rest of the season. I really I wish I could have conviction on this, but I've been upset with things that he's done, and I mean, specifically, I'm going to get granular for a second.
Do it.
Specifically with the damned if you do, damned if you don't on these final drives. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, people do get upset if he sends these zero blitzes, and people get upset if he's playing soft zone. And it really sucks because, I mean, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think I understand where he's coming from as a head coach,
Mm.
in terms of this offense is explosive. We can afford to take these chances. If we take these chances with zero blitzes and create negative plays, it only gives our offenses better chances. And if we
Mhm.
don't, our offense can make up for it because it's so explosive. But I mean, personally, in the past, and this is where I've had a problem, and I want him to find this middle ground is on these final drives, you really see him so afraid to give up a touchdown that he's giving up 8 yards of play. And
Mhm.
that's my issue. It's not like I don't like the zero blitzes, and I don't like the afraid to give up a touchdown. I just want to live in a world where maybe he's okay in a single high shell, and he's okay with the philosophy of giving up a touchdown and kind of playing a little bit tighter and squeezing space in the intermediate area of the field. And I
Mm.
feel like that's kind of the world that we all want him to live in, but it's idealistic. And if you do that one too many times, you give up that touchdown. But this is kind of the point. Like, if you give up that touchdown quickly, you give Josh Allen the chance to go fight for the scoreboard again.
Complimentary football, even though that's a term that everybody likes to mock and everything
Yeah.
now. You highlight a really good point though. Like it's the same thing you and I were talking about a bunch throughout the season with Ken Dorsey. Like it's just there are so many variables in the game of football from a coaching standpoint to the on the field standpoint with the players, everything on and off the field. Like it's very rare, if ever, you can just point the finger at one person,
Yeah.
coach, player, side of the ball, whatever, play. Like it's very rare where you can point to just one thing and be like, well, this team lost because of this, because so many things are interconnected in a multitude of ways. Hell, even if, this is a good one. I didn't even mean to do it, but this Greg just commented. This Greg Davis said, if AJ Brown finishes his third step, fumbles called, and the Bills win. Yeah, you're like an extra 1/10 of a second away from that being a fumble and the game being done. Or again, there's a ton of game left to be played after this, but if James Cook catches that rail route, that's that's a touchdown, like let alone the field goals and everything else. Like,
but it changes the complexion of the game. It changes game flow. It changes how play calling sequences happen. Like it changes everything, and that's football.
That there's just so many variables that go on. There has been a multitude of amazing plays by players that have nullified huge gaffes and mistakes from other players and coaches throughout like the entire time that football and sports in general have existed. Like guys, hitting home runs in the bottom of the ninth that makes everybody completely forget that the closer blew it in the top of the ninth by giving up 2 runs and letting the game be tied.
Swinging through a take sign.
Boom, that's a good piece. Yeah, like all these things that like happen that nullify what goes on at times or kind of nullifies mistakes. I think that's the bigger thing that bothers me is like, not to take anything away from McDermott, from a negative standpoint, but like, man, it's just like all these bad little things that continue to happen for this team this year, all these little tiny breadcrumbs like of failure that when added together leads to the big 6-6 underwhelming puzzle. Like you literally just need 1 or 2 of these bounces to go your way. And it's a completely different season. The fact that none of them have bounced their way from a player or coaching perspective just boggles my mind. Like, because again, we talked about it the last time you were here. If the field goal nonsense doesn't happen against Denver, does Ken Dorsey end up getting fired? He wasn't fired because of that one game result. It was a culmination of a multitude of things. But does he still get fired if the Bills win that game? Are we still having Sean McDermott's head on a stick right now if the injuries don't happen to Milano and Daquan Jones, and or if the Bills pull out this win against the Eagles? Because my thought is, with how reactionary everyone is, if the Bills beat the Eagles, however they beat them, 38-34, 41-38, whatever the hell the score was going to be, everybody would have texted the Stringer Bell gift from the wire saying, tell everybody we back up. And they would have been Bills Mafia all day. Bills are back. Just beat the Eagles 7-5. No one can stop us. And a lot of this conversation wouldn't be happening. It seems like there's just so much ebbing and flowing based on results, which is, again, losing sight of what is happening that leads to those results and whether or not it's sustainable positively or negatively. And when that starts to happen, man, like, you can get lost in like the sauce.
I think this fan base has gotten lost in some ways because of that expectation. I mean, you think about what just happened this past Sunday. The Bills played like a championship caliber football team.
Yeah, against a great football team.
Like that, sure, the Eagles didn't play their best. They didn't have Lane Johnson, whatever. The Bills didn't have Daquan Jones. The Bills didn't have Matt Milano. The Bills didn't have Trey White. Like injuries happen, right? Yeah. But the Bills still played fantastic football despite all of that, despite some coaching blunders, despite everything, despite the weather. Like the Bills played a fantastic game and they came up short. If they were going into this game with less losses and they lost to the Eagles in that way, that game would be taken so differently. And I can tell you today, like from a national perspective, like teams respect the Bills. Like teams respect the Bills now and they understand that they are better than 6-6 because of the measuring stick that game was and who they played and how they played that game. And notably how Josh Allen played that game and how Josh Allen has played the last 2 weeks. Like this team isn't reflective of a 6-6 record. I think this season, like where the team is right now is not 6-6. Where the team is in 2023 as a whole, yeah, it's 6-6. Like we got here for a reason. But the way the team is playing right now is not a 6-6 team. And I feel like people have lost that because of the playoff picture, the playoff race, the rest of the schedule, and like all of that is fair. Like it's fair
Mm.
to do that as a fan, but holistically, like the way this team played on Sunday, they're better than 6-6, and they have every opportunity to finish the season 11-6.
Yeah. And like I said, this loss against the Eagles, like, kills me, but it's just because of, like, the little things that
Yeah,
led to it. Like, I felt worse after the Denver loss. The New England one was probably the worst one to me because I thought they were such a bad football team.
yeah. I mean,
And
that's the most points the Patriots scored all year by 9.
it's brutal. And they limped into that game. Things were so bad. The Patriots limped in. Like, they were such a
Yeah,
bad football team. Even like the Jets loss is frustrating, but like we talked about before, okay, you can chalk it up to like week 1 nonsense, whatever, get your footing, come back. And man, like, it's just been a wild year. And yeah, I
yeah.
don't think this team, and it's so funny too. Like, I know I don't want to get into it too much because it's, such a hot topic now, but like the whole advanced metric piece, like the Bills are in the top tier for like everything for
Mhm.
EPA and all these things that should say like this is a really good football team. And the fact that they're sitting there at 6-6, and again, like we talked about, like it's going to be a wild ride coming out of the bye. They could run the table and go 11-6 and be that team. And again, I was saying this before you jumped onto the show. Like they could be the wild card team going in at 11-6 that nobody wants to play, and everybody's like,
You're
crap, like
right.
the Bills got in, or they could finish 7-10, or only might finish with 6 wins, or finish 9-8, or 8-9. Like there's a multitude of possibilities, and yeah, it kind of makes that Sean McDermott seat potentially hotter. We'll see what happens with Joe Brady. Like there's so many unknowns from like a football perspective that are kind of fun, but also like terrifying and terrible at the same time. And one of those pieces, Kendall, as we switch. Well, anything to add on Sean McDermott before we switch the conversation?
No, I had a question for you, but I think I'll just save it because I don't want to step on the toes of the segments and how they're driven. Because
Fair
I'll
enough.
save it and see if it gets touched, and then I'll bring it up at the end.
Fair enough. I like it. Make sure you don't forget. Make sure you mark it because I'm gonna forget.
I'll find a
Um,
post-it note.
nice. Von Miller. I kind of I was gonna find some like clever way of being like, speaking of disappointments, like Von Miller. Um Man, just for some perspective for people, although this isn't gonna make people feel better. Again, last year he played through the first 11 games. He got hurt in that 11th game against the Detroit Lions, but he led all Bills defensive linemen last year in pass rush productivity. He averaged roughly 4 pressures per game with the Bills. Was tremendous up front, looked every bit like the superstar that he was brought on to be. This year, he's 10th amongst Bills defensive linemen in pass rush productivity, and he's averaging, 1 pressure per game. So
Is that
first,
is that since he's been active or the entire season?
what do you mean?
Like,
Oh, ranking?
is he 10th on the
Yes,
team since the week that he's been active, or 10th on the team including the entire year? Oh,
10th
actually,
on the
it's a
team for
productivity. It's an
yes.
efficiency metric already. It
So
doesn't
10th
matter.
on the team for the entire year. And
Right.
again, I included if you're going with the entire team, again, sample size will throw it off, but he's 18th overall. But you have guys like Trey White has a 50 pass rush productivity
Right.
because he,
Yeah.
he rushed once and got a hit on, or he rushed twice and got a QB hit on one. So he's at 50%. But yeah, so 10th this year amongst Bills defensive linemen in pass rush productivity, first last year. But the big one is the pressures per game. He went 4 pressures per game last year, technically a little over 4 because he had 45 pressures in 11 games, technically like 11, not even full 11, like 10 and a quarter because he got injured to start the second half. But only 1 pressure per game this year. And I'm not. Here's my like thing with all of it. And what it's not a non-issue for me, but one, I do think he's shown some improvement little by little, week by week. It's marginal and it's small, but he's got some good reps on tape. But any way that you slice it, he's 4th on the edge depth chart behind Leonard Floyd, Greg Rousseau, and AJ Epinesa. And Groot is playing hurt. He's got multiple injuries with his
Yeah.
foot/ankle. It's a problem. But I think all of it, like how frustrated people are with him, is purely determined. Again, we talk about this expectation thing. How frustrated you are with him is determined by what you expected from him this year. Now, for me, I didn't expect much. I didn't even think he'd come back. I didn't even think he'd come back, / I didn't want him to come back until November. Like, just take your time, do your thing. And when he did come back, I thought it would just be, he'd be like a rotational cherry on top to a good football team. Problem is, he hasn't really been a cherry on top
No.
in coming back. And then that is wrapped in the bigger part of the bigger problem, which is the injuries and injuries to the defense and the team record as a whole has put everyone under a microscope, and his name and contract makes that microscope light, or that like fog lamp light, shine super brightly on him. The team's banged up, they're losing, and when that happens, for most people, I think they would look at him and be like, man, it'd be nice if your superstars played like superstars and could be a difference maker. And he's still like a superstar in name, but I thought it was a lot to expect from him this year to be that superstar level Von Miller. He's 34 years old. He's coming off a torn ACL. He had already torn that ACL before. And we also have that kind of like rule of thumb where usually you're not back to or close to your previous self until 2 years removed from that injury. So you have that on top of, again, being 34 and tearing that ACL for the second time. I never expected much from him in this season. Again, I thought he'd be like a nice rotational cherry on top. I do think he's been underwhelming. I am concerned, in terms of how much juice he can add, what's he going to look like next year. And now all of a sudden that contract that he signed very much looks like an albatross. But where's your head at when it comes to evaluating Von Miller so far this year, and kind of what do you expect going forward from him?
No, I mean I echo a lot of the same thoughts. I mean, I'm frustrated with honestly the how they handled bringing him back more than anything. I think it was obviously clear that he was determined to come back quickly and help this team get to the place that they think they can be. But I don't know if I really don't want to speak to the idea that he rushed his rehab in any way, because I don't really think that's true. But I think the Bills, in terms of bringing him back, kind of rushed it. And I think they did everything that they could to slow him down and understand, like, hey, you're 33. Like, we don't need to win football games in September. We need to win
Mm-hmm.
football games in December, January. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's most important. The rest of our team, we have a roster that's set up to, get ourselves in a position to hold us in a place where when you come back, you will be welcomed and you will be a great help. But I think, like, opening that 21-day window and then making him active that week, like, you have a 21-day window. Like, look at what the Vikings are doing right now with Justin Jefferson. Like,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like, there's a
Mm-hmm.
21-day window for a reason. There's no reason to risk it in any way. And especially with the investment that we made in Von Miller last offseason, like, the
Yeah.
age he is, like, what are we
Uh-huh.
doing? Like, there is no reason to rush him back that quickly. There's a reason we signed Leonard Floyd. Like, there were things that the Bills did in terms of player personnel to mitigate the loss of Von Miller for
Mm.
half the season. And I thought it was honestly really well handled by Brandon Beane.
Yeah.
But then when we get to the point of activating him off IR, I really wondered what was going on, because not only did we activate him for that first game and not utilize the full opportunity of the 21-day window, but he's playing on such a limited pitch count. It's like, what was the
Yeah.
point then? Like, if he was going to be practicing with game reps, just let him practice with practice
Yeah.
reps. Like, it just does it's it's malpractice. Like, it is malpractice at its roots, and it sucks because he was a fantastic player, and I don't know if was should be like a cemented term for who he is as a player. I really don't know. But right now my expectations are really low. And I don't know if that's because of Vaughn or if it's because of the malpractice of the Bills and how they use the IR slot. I really don't understand what happened there and what the thought process was, because it feels really disjointed. Like, specifically the signing of Leonard Floyd specifically, and then how great he was through the first 4 weeks.
Mm.
And then they're like, oh, we got to get Vaughn back. Like, we're hurting without him. Like, are we? Are we hurting without our 33-year-old who's rehabbing from his second ACL injury?
34.
And
34
well,
years old.
34,
Even
right?
older.
34 now, yeah. And he's had an Achilles injury. Like, this guy,
Mm.
he makes a living on core stability, ankle, knee flexion, like
Athleticism, bend.
like he makes a living, a Hall of Fame career off of the bend, the flexion of his lower extremities, and you're like, yeah, we got to get him back because we're hurting when we're top 5 in the league in sacks
The
and
pitch count
pressures.
thing, yeah, right? Like, the pitch count thing really got me, and, like, that's a good point because he comes back the Jacksonville game was the first game back, right?
Yes, it was
Yeah,
week 5, yeah.
and he played, like his snaps were so he was on the field so sparingly. I'm actually going to,
Yeah, I want to check this out too, like specifically the snap
yeah, I'm
counts for
pulling them
those
right now. So
games.
he was on the field against Jacksonville for 20 snaps. 20 snaps for Jacksonville. Actually, this is higher than I thought it was. 20 snaps against Jacksonville, 27 against the Giants, 6 versus the Patriots, 26 versus Tampa, 24 versus Cincinnati, 22 versus Denver, 16 versus the Jets, and 21 versus Philly. Majority of those reps being pass rush, 113 pass rushes to 40 run defense snaps. It's actually, again, higher than I thought it was, especially for that first game. But yeah, to a degree, like if you are so concerned about the pitch count, just let him build it up with practice reps and like in-game situations within a practice time. Now, again, I know nothing can simulate, game reps like being in an actual game, so on and
Yeah,
so forth.
sure.
But it was a very interesting handling of it. And I'm honestly on the fence. I hate being a fence sitter, but for this one, I truly am on the fence. Like, because part of me doesn't think he's washed. He's had a couple reps where he's going through guys and drive. Now, does he have the bend and the flexion? No,
Right,
like that is
that's what
not there.
I'm most concerned about. Like, I have
Yes,
really only seen him try go speed power so far.
that's all he's done. Like, and if he gets good hand placement in someone's chest, he's driving them back. Like, he's been good on a couple spikes. He's been good at wrong arming tight ends on split zone runs. Like, he's had a couple good reps where you see some power or you see some speed to power. But exactly to your point, man, like you're not seeing him win around the arc or run that arc and flatten. And what's concerning for me with him is it's that right ACL. And he's so dominant off of the defense's left, which means his right knee is that inside knee. That's the one he's leaning on when he's bending, when he's dipping around that side. But also, it's not great from the other side either, because if he rushes from the other side, that's the knee that he has to plant on the outside to flatten and kind of run that arc a little bit or finish the arc. Yeah, or spike inside. And he has a repertoire of pass rush moves. Like, this is a person who, the whole pass rush summit, like, he's tremendously heady. He is as much as he is athletic and an impressive specimen, like from a physical standpoint, he is tremendously heady from a football IQ standpoint.
Yeah.
Like, he is a craftsman when it comes to pass rushing and understanding leverage and positioning and how to rush the quarterback and how to beat offensive linemen. That being said, so many of his moves are tied to and or dependent upon that lower body flexibility, fluidity, strength, and stability. And I'm concerned with what I've seen. Now, again, it could be just basic, like we said, dude's 34. It's the second time he tore that ACL. And even if he wasn't 34 and hadn't torn that ACL before, you usually don't see guys get back to themselves until the second year removed from that ACL. We saw it with Trey White last year, right? Who Trey White was down the stretch in 2022 was significantly different than what he was this year in 2023. Again, ironically, the play where he pops his Achilles is because he's one-on-one covering Tyreek Hill and does a tremendous job in that Miami game, right? Like, so it's even if you're a prime specimen in the prime of your career and have never had an injury before, it's still usually going to take you 2 years. So he's got that on top of, again, being 34 miles on the tires and having torn that ACL before. But I am concerned of what does he look like next year?
Yeah.
I'm past like what he's going to be this year. Like, I don't think this year he's going to be anything more than a spiker off of the defense's left, so going against right tackle, so he can plant on that left leg and spike inside. I don't think he's going to be anything more than a spiker and a guy who can do speed to power. I'm really, really, really hoping that, man, like if the game is on the line against the Chiefs and he just burns like Jawan Taylor around the corner and strip sacks Mahomes, and it's like, oh, like awesome, like there's that one play, maybe we'll see what happens. But Mike McGlinchey has had a horrible year for Denver right tackle.
God.
And he talking like I think it was second most pressures given up amongst tackles, like one of the worst efficiency ratings for pass blocking amongst all offensive linemen, especially tackles. And Von couldn't generate anything against him. He couldn't generate really anything against the Jets. There were a couple reps in this game against Philly where, and I hate doing this, like he's getting one-on-one blocked by like Stoll, the tight end. Like he can't get past Stoll, like, which is, that would have been a death sentence. Even last year, like that would have been a death sentence. Like you're going to block Von Miller with a tight end. Like you just sign your own death certificate. Like you're done. And I'm more concerned for what he is next year because I don't know if it's just this, he doesn't trust the knee yet, or, again, it's the year 2 thing, yada, yada. I don't know if it's one of those things or if it truly is like, nah, man, like he significantly impacted a core piece of his game and he ain't coming back.
Yeah, that's my primary concern. It's really just about, where his bread is buttered, like how he made his career and if that has been impacted too much. I mean, looking at his contract right now and looking at next season, like we're looking at essentially a $24 million cap hit for a rotational pass rusher.
What's his dead cap if he gets cut next year? At any point, like what's the best option? Whether it's like whether it's a post June 1st release, post June 1st trade, like what is it? I know it's high. I just don't remember it off.
If I'm reading Spot Track right, it's 32 and a half.
That's what I thought it was. I thought it was 32 million. God, that sucks.
So
here's a question for you.
That's less than ideal.
Nice. And Bills Are Electric just came in too and said 32 million.
Already all over it. I love the interactive watching from Bills Are Electric.
I also love Richard just said, yeah, don't ask. I like that. Would you start Kingsley Jonathan? Like, would you sit Von and play Kingsley Jonathan over him? Like, if push came to shove and you had to put one on the field for a game, who are you playing?
I mean, it's tough to say that because Von's going to be coming off of a bye week now. Like, if you had asked me that going into the Philly game, I think it would have made more sense because then you essentially have like 20 days.
Okay,
in between
let me
games.
rephrase. It's fourth down. It's a known pass rushing situation right now. Game's on the line. It's 4th and 8, and you're up by 6. Whatever the hell.
I would. Yep. I don't even.
Kingsley Jonathan.
Dude, it's just input name here. Like it's not even like specifically Kingsley Jonathan. It's just like.
Would you rush? Okay, I'm being dead serious right now.
Okay.
Would you rush Tyrell Dodson off the edge instead of Von Miller in a known pass rushing situation to win the game?
Who's replacing Dodson in his traditional position?
Okay, so it's dependent upon who's replacing.
There's a lot of variables.
Okay. Poyer is in as the dime linebacker, and Dodson's at edge.
Yes, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. I'm doing it because I think Dodson has like just the tenacity. Like right now, Von's not really playing with like a tenacity about him either. I feel like there's not a lot of grit to what he's doing. Like he can't get in there and like, I don't know. He can't do much right now, man. Like at least Dodson can get in there.
Amy says Von cheering from the sideline for sure, but hell no on Dodson.
I honestly feel like the way Dodson plays is very gritty. Like there's just a lot of tenacity and grittiness to the way he plays. He has no technicality in how he rushes a passer, but I feel like just alone on the greatness.
But no, like what's crazy is, and this is what sucks, the fact that you immediately weren't like, Anthony, that's a stupid question. The fact that we are actually like entertaining it and you're explaining it is wild.
And I really want to reframe like this whole thing. Like this is not a shit on Von thing. Like I am so much more upset with the Bills with how they handled Von instead of Von himself. Like I am sure Von was technically in a position to be ready for week 1, but like he was never going to be at a position to help this team, and it's on the team to make sure he understands that he just needs to keep doing what he's doing, and they're only going to activate him once he's in a position to actually help this team, once he's in a position to actually be better than the 53rd man on the roster.
Man, yeah, it really is. It's so funny too. Like I wasn't even like when he was activated for the Jacksonville game and I saw the snap count, I was like, okay, like they're going to ramp him up little by little. Yeah. And I figured it would go from 20 to 25 to 30 or some incremental increase.
It's just stuck though.
Yeah, because also like too, but here's the thing too, like I don't even know if it's stuck because he's still on a pitch count or it's stuck because they're like, well, he ain't doing anything. So why put him out there? And I tell you where I'm at, and I don't even think this is like a hot take, and I'm very happy because I believed in him a little bit. AJ Epinesa needs to be on the field when it comes to
Yeah,
pass rushing situations. Groot is banged up, so it's up and down with what you're getting from him. AJ Epinesa and Leonard Floyd need to be your dudes coming off the edge in known
yep.
pass rushing situations. I am not taking AJ Epinesa or Leonard Floyd, either of them, off the field for Von Miller, which is wild. And I'm probably trotting out Greg Rousseau with like a broken foot or whatever the hell he's got going on. You can tell like he's hurting. I'm probably trotting him out there at edge other than Von Miller. Damn, this is brutal too, but this is also was kind of fun schematically. I'd put Ed Oliver at edge and rush him off than I would Von at this point. Like he's just not giving you quality reps. And there is a certain usage for him, like we've said, right? Like you can have him inside as a spiker. You can have him, as that guy to go speed to power and see what he can do. But it's just, it's so niche for what he can do right now. And it sucks watching him out there. Like he doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't look like he has any juice from an emotional standpoint or a physical standpoint. And again, I don't think this is probably a minor storyline when you're talking about a playoff push. If Daquan Jones is there and Matt Milano is there and Trey, even if Trey went down, like Trey is tremendously important to me. But given what the Bills have at corner, I think they could have, even without Rasul Douglas, I was not happy, but I would have been okay with Dane Jackson and Benford and Elam versus going from Milano to Dodson and Williams or going from Daquan Jones to everything else that's come after Daquan Jones. Like those injuries killed them. And if all those dudes are healthy, then this Von storyline is like the nitpick for everyone. Like everybody's
Yeah.
sitting there being like, man, well, the Bills are 9-3 or 10-2 or whatever, but like, what's Von Miller going to look like? And then it's more of like a fun if then type of conversation.
Right.
Instead, it's just a disappointing conversation on top of what's been an underwhelming and disappointing season up to this point.
Yup, such is life.
Yup. Man, that's yeah, it's sad. It sucks. And I don't expect much from him going forward this year. I think what we've seen, I think he might have a flash here and there that could get you excited for 2024. But for me, I don't have much expectation for him for 2023. My bigger focus or worry or question is what to expect from him in 2024.
Bingo.
Given a full off season, we'll see how he starts to come back and go from there.
That's really the main concern. The out is after 2024. So 2024 is the big evaluation year. Hopefully we get as many flashes as possible this year. But yeah, agreed. Expectations are low.
Bro, you remember you and I went live on Disguise coverage.
Bro, the day he was signed.
He signed at like 6:52 and we went live at 7:00. Like we were offline, like talking about the show notes, and all of a sudden we were both like, dude, Von Miller just signed with the Bills, and we had to scrap everything and redo, and just, man, like the excitement from that moment. I also think that's a point too, like everybody who's like shitting on the Von Miller contract,
remember that feeling.
Right? Like for most, it's hindsight. I don't think very few people were coming in here that, and the people who were negative about it were Chiefs fans or Broncos fans who were just like upset and being bitter or like whatever the hell, or Rams fans or whoever was like poo-pooing it. But that was an amazing signing. Like that was a put your chips into the middle of the table, drop your nuts type of signing from Brandon Beane. And until Von went down last year, it worked. He was a stud, and the Bills front was nasty. So to like shit all over it now, again, I think a lot of it is very much like hindsight based. And yes, if he cannot be anything close to what he was, and if he is just a shell of himself, that contract is a tremendous albatross, and it is terrible. But in that moment, it was a tremendous signing, and it still was.
What I would add is, in that moment, I think the first thing people saw was the sticker price, the 6 years for $120 million for a 33-year-old, and everyone's like, "That's stupid. That's an objectively stupid signing to give someone that old that much money." And then we got the details and we saw it was essentially a 3-year with an out, and there's more attached to it. Literally, once you learn the 3-year with an out with attachments, you're like, the only thing that could break this contract is an early injury. And that's
Yeah,
what happened.
that's what happened. And to that point as well, he like, that was always going to be a move that, like, at the end of the second year, even if he balled out, you were still gonna be like, "Oh, that cap hit is rough." Like, that move was a very much like, "Yo, we're going for a title in 2022 and 2023." Like,
Yeah.
and if he doesn't go down, you're still looking at a dude who's, like, top 10 edge rusher at that
Yeah.
position, at worst, like, top 15, and he's having a significant impact. But, yeah, man, it's wild, like, how short, like, a couple of years, and how that conversation changes from when, the conversation you and I are having now to what it was
Yeah.
like and of breaking the news for everyone.
Time flies.
Um, I know time does fly. Now you're in what, 8th grade now, and you're growing
I
up
know,
so
right,
fast.
man?
It's absolutely crazy. All right, last segment here for you. You can break them down in detail. You can list them, whatever you got. I don't know if you have one, if you have several. What for you needs to be
Hmm.
fixed and or improved? I hear you go, What for you
Hmm.
needs to be fixed or improved for this Bills team coming out of the bye? To whether it's broad, make the playoffs, or specifically like, here's what they need to do to win 5 out of 5 and run the table. Like, what for you goes into that bucket? And if you want me to go first, I can, but what do you got?
I'm just trying to think defensively, like specifically what I would change defensively because I like the direction of the offense. I like where it's going. I think the only thing I change about the offense right now is keep Dalton Kincaid involved. I
Mm,
feel like he'll fizzle out of game plans a little bit. The offense works when he's going. Not saying we need to force feed him or anything. I just think he deserves targets. So I'd like to see those targets scattered throughout the game,
okay.
um, just offensively. But then, I mean, defensively, it's just so tough because of the
The injuries.
replacements.
I
Like what's
know.
going on right now? It's tough to say like,
Like, the thing I
oh,
want
I
to
need
fix or
this.
improve is like
Yeah.
linebacker. Like,
Yeah, like I don't know, sign Shaq Leonard. Like I don't know, like
oof.
it doesn't seem like that's happening after visits with the Cowboys and Eagles.
He's so like, I looked into like some because I thought it was just a back injury, but it's like a nerve injury that was
Yeah,
causing back problems. Like, and you watch him, like, I feel some of the most fun conversations I had with people was like, who's the best off ball linebacker, Fred Warner or like Shaq Leonard back when he was Darius Leonard? And it just sucks to see. Like, this is non Bills
yeah,
related, but like, I feel so bad for him because he was electric
100%.
and he was one of legitimately the best football players, not just linebackers or
Oh yeah,
defenders. He was one of the best football players in all of football. And it just sucks to see what he is now.
100%. Um, I really can't think of anything like specific to the defense. I think broadly
Adjustment
speaking,
base is one for me, like in-game
yeah,
adjustments and
but
recognizing like
but
where to pivot.
that's such a Sean McDermott thing that I don't know if
Yes,
that's happening just
correct.
coming out of a bye week. You know what I mean? Like that seems like an off-season self-scouting thing that he's had the opportunity to do before. So
Mm.
it seems a little like revisionist history to be like,
Mm.
yeah, he needs to improve this.
Yeah.
Like he's needed to improve this. Well,
Stop giving up points is
like
also like
a
what
bye
like,
week isn't gonna do that, you know?
yeah.
um I think like my biggest thing, and it's super broad and like honestly very obvious, but like you have to win every AFC game. Like if you're gonna lose a game down the stretch, it has to be to the Cowboys. That is the only game you can lose.
That's fair. I'm that's also another like frustrating thing for me too. Like, all their friggin' losses, except for this last one against the Eagles, have all been conference losses, which
Yeah,
hurt them for the play. Like, it's bad enough too. Like, you've lost the tiebreaker to the Broncos.
yeah.
Like, but all their losses are conference losses, so they don't even have that. Like, man, it's so unfortunate from that standpoint. That's a huge one for me as well. Yeah, like if you're gonna lose one, it has to be the NFC game. But even then, like, you still can't afford it, like, because you have to have so much help with all the teams that are ahead of you, and because you're in that tiebreaker scenario, like, you've left yourself so little room for error.
Like are
From
we
a mark,
rooting for the Texans this week against the Broncos? Because
right? I
like
don't. So, like, I think the Texans are the better team, so I want the Broncos to win. But then, like,
but then we're behind the 8 ball in terms of
right?
tiebreakers.
Like,
Like
same
we
thing. Same thing for
need the
this past
Broncos to
weekend.
not make the
I
playoffs.
know, like, and it was the same thing for this past weekend. Like, I was rooting for the Bengals to beat the Steelers, but then I was like, well, then the Bengals will be ahead of the Bills still, but no, they'll lose out in the end. And then I was like, but will
Will
they?
they?
Because they have the tie. Like, it just sucks to do this. Like, knowing that it's not even one of those like, you know, the sketch. Like, I remember last year with Miami, after the Bills lost the first one in Miami.
Yeah.
I still thought the Bills were the better team. And I remember seeing Miami's schedule and knowing who Miami was. And I was like, it's going to be fine. Like, it'll even out. The Bills will win that game on Saturday night. They'll take the division back. Same thing when the Bills lost in New England the year before or whatever, like on the Monday night game where the Pats only threw it like 3 times or whatever. I looked at the schedule. I saw what it was. I was like, it's fine. They'll get that division. They'll be fine. I saw the 2 schedules. It's okay. I don't feel super confident now because like the Texans are like good, but they can go anywhere. Their schedule isn't super hard. Same thing with the Broncos. Same thing with the Browns. Same thing even with the friggin' Colts. Like, I can't believe
Hey,
the
it's a
Bills are
first
such
place
a
schedule. This is the life
but it's not
we
even the
live in.
first place schedule piece. It's like, even with the first place schedule, like there's legitimately 3 losses that should not have existed for this team. That first Jets game, the Pats game, and the Broncos game. This team should be sitting there at 9-3, and we're not even having a question about anything.
9-3 with the tough part coming up.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. It just sucks. Like, it's so frustrating. I hate that conference piece. It's driving me nuts, like going forward and thinking of like tiebreaker stuff. For me, I'll give you a couple of mine. Like, one, and this is something I've been pounding the table for all year. Like, I want to see the Bills continue to commit to the run game early in games, week in and week out. They have a good run game. If you're including,
I have a good one off of this. Keep going though.
Oh, okay, copy that. Oh, I'm glad I got your approval to continue on my show. Thank you so much. If you include all positions from an EPA per attempt standpoint, the Buffalo Bills are first in the league from a team rushing standpoint and EPA per attempt. If you are just doing running back carries only for EPA per attempt, they are 4th in the league. They have been there all year. Top 3, top 5 at worst as like a running back carries only team. They're a good run team. Now, their run game struggled a bit at times against Philly because Philly has horses up front and just from either being predictable with, run and tackle, wrap and dart, or just losing one-on-one assignments to Jordan Davis or Brandon Graham or Fletcher Cox or Jalen Carter. Like, again, things happen. Philly's full of monsters up front, but this is a really good running football team. Establish the run early, put that threat and worry into a defense's mind, knowing that they can beat you with things that have nothing to do with Josh Allen, and they can just put the ball into James Cook and Latavius Murray and Ty Johnson's hands and run it down your throat, and it's going to be a problem. So I want to see that commitment early, and then we know all the added benefits of the RPO game and the play action game off of it. So I want to see commitment to the run game early. I don't want to see it get worked in the second quarter because when, things aren't working well with the pass these first several drives, so let's start to pivot to the run. No, I want that established early on. Also tied within that, I want to see more of what we saw against Philly. Again, granted, Philly's defense kind of played into it more, but give me more of those spread looks with Joe Brady that allows Josh Allen to escape the pocket and be a threat with his legs from a non-design run standpoint. So give me more of that spread action. Like, I want power run. I want downhill power run alignments and formations. And on the next play, I want 5 wide spread out, and the defense is like, oh, how do we cover this? And if they don't cover it or they cover it and they leave a gap, Josh Allen can take off. Like, so committing to the run game early and continuing to allow Josh Allen's legs from a scramble standpoint to be a factor. Second one, this goes along with the margin for error being too small for this team, turnovers. Like, they cannot afford a turnover of any kind in any game. I don't care if it's a fumble. I don't care if it's a good interception, a bad interception. Like, no more turnovers. The margin for error is too small for this team, and the defense lacks the playmakers to consistently weather the storm for losing the turnover battle. And in a similar vein, like, penalties kind of go into that as well. Like, they have to clean up the penalties on both sides of the ball. Again, the Eagles game was horribly officiated from a penalty standpoint on both sides that worked against the Bills, but I chalk turnovers and penalties all into kind of like the self-inflicted wound type of thing or unforced errors. You are in a position from a loss standpoint where you can't afford losses, and you're at a standpoint with your defense, with the injuries and what you're playing with in terms of depth guys, where you can't do anything to make their life any harder. You cannot allow an offense to start the ball near midfield because you threw an interception or you fumbled. Special teams is thrown into that as well, right? No more big returns on punts. Like, you cannot lose the field position battle, the turnover battle, the penalty battle. You have left yourselves no margin for error from a win-loss perspective. But again, with where the team is at from a health standpoint, there's little room for error from a margin standpoint for the defense. You have to do everything you can from a complementary football piece to not set the defense up for failure in any way, shape, or form. So again, that unforced errors piece, but turnovers, penalties, special team pieces. And then my last one, it's again more like large scale, just that in-game adjustments being more timely for the offense and the
Yeah.
defense, like not waiting until the second quarter, the second half to pivot to the run game, not waiting until, the third or fourth quarter, or again, whatever, like just waiting, not waiting too long to change things up from a coverage standpoint or from a front perspective or from a rush standpoint or offensively pivoting from pass to run or run to pass or working in more RPO or trying to take advantages of certain aspects of the field. There has to be more of a real time answer. And I think we've seen this a little bit from Joe Brady. And we've seen it in spurts from Sean McDermott. It's just been a matter of whether or not they've worked. Like, I don't think Sean McDermott has consistently just kind of stood pat. I think his
Right.
adjustments have either sometimes been, there's been times where they've been too late. But I think it's more
Yeah,
just
too
been like
slow.
too slow or him not making the right adjustment, like him adjusting
Right.
early, but it not being the right one. So like the in-game adjustments, like again, and this is somewhat like pie in the sky, I guess, to a degree, but like they just can't afford to, all right, here's what we're going to do for the second quarter. Cool. Whatever you do, it has to be the right thing because you cannot afford to have a bad half, a bad quarter. You can't afford to be put behind the eight ball from a mental standpoint or an actual on-field score perspective because of what the on-field and win-loss perspective off the field, how small that margin for error is for this team.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna piggyback on two of those with like small granular things. Um, Turnover margin, you mentioned it. This past loss to the Eagles, first loss in 2023 where they won the turnover margin.
Oh, you mentioned that the last time you were here. Yeah, the
Right.
turnover margin.
This is the first time in 2023 that they won the turnover battle but lost the game. They were 4-0 before that.
There was also some
Otherwise,
crazy stat. Like, did you see what Ed Werder tweeted?
no. Do you know,
Oh, yeah.
paraphrasing it? How
No,
close
I
is it?
have it right now because I texted it to
Okay.
my one
Okay.
buddy and we basically kind of like cried over it. The Bills, the Bills are the 40th team since the 1970 merger to have 500 yards, 10 third down
Oh, yeah.
conversions,
Yeah, I
and a
got that one.
positive turnover margin in a game. They are the first team to lose in that scenario. Teams were 39-0 prior to the game against the Eagles.
Yeah, there's a bunch of those. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's a lot of anomalistic things about the Bills this year. Like it's
They
pretty
don't make
crazy.
sense. Nothing makes sense. Like,
Like they have the fourth highest point differential in the league. Like I think it's plus 101 right now. They're the only team over 100 with over 4 losses.
so stupid.
Like
So
it
dumb.
it doesn't make sense, but that's just like because they lose close games, and they win other games by so much, it makes that point differential so great, but then the record doesn't show it. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a lot of anomalistic stuff about the Bills this year, but that's what turnovers do. Like turnovers
Oh, yeah.
suck. Like
Yep.
you went on a whole monologue about it, like the field position battle that changes the position that it puts a injured defense into. Like it is really hard to overcome turnovers. I agree. The margin for error is very slim. But back to the running game point, this is the point that you sparked in my head, and I realized I want to see more Ty Johnson. Like I'm
Oh.
kind of at a point where, not that Latavius Murray has lost his job, he has done nothing wrong. It's that we're seeing a lot of juice from Ty Johnson. Like
Mhm.
I don't know. I haven't kept my eyes on, nor have I watched the tape of like how he is, or even if he has opportunities. But pass blocking, like I want to know
Mhm.
how he is as a pass blocker, if he's capable of being in on passing downs for that responsibility. We obviously saw his receiving touchdown against, that was
Mhm.
Broncos,
Mhm.
right? Um,
No, Jets.
no, that was the Jets. Yeah. Right.
I was gonna say
The
I tried
revenge
to
touchdown.
I tried to burn the Broncos game from my brain, and I remember that Ty Johnson score, so it can't be
But
right.
yeah, like I think his skill set is obviously still very complimentary of James Cook.
Mhm.
But I don't want to lose any of this skill set from Latavius Murray. So I'm trying to see where the overlap is and if he deserves to usurp that role from Latavius Murray. But I'm ready in terms of just a juice perspective and what he brings to the offense.
Mm.
I think there's enough overlap and enough improvement from Ty Johnson and what we're seeing from him, especially the last few weeks. And it seems like Joe Brady likes him because obviously since the OC change, we've seen more Ty Johnson. So give me more Ty Johnson the rest of the way. I think he's a really good compliment to James Cook.
What, I like that piece. I like what they've gotten from Ty Johnson. I liked him in the preseason, and then I was like, I wonder if he, like, kinda sticks around, and I was like, "Eh." whatever.
Yeah,
Like they got
right.
Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. Like it is what it is. But I
But
liked him
now
too.
he's got his opportunity now, and he's
Yeah,
running
he's
with
doing
it.
well. But he also
Literally.
did well with the Jets. Like I liked him and Michael
Yeah.
Carter as a
Yeah.
1-2. They were a cool 1-2 combo. I even started Ty Johnson. I mean, I
Yeah.
had injuries, but I
No,
started
he
him in
had like
fantasy a bunch. He
4
did well.
very, very relevant fantasy weeks.
Yeah, he did well. And like he in the pass and the run, I liked him and Michael Carter as a 1-2. Like I thought they, and it's funny too, because Carter's not even there
I
now with the
know.
Jets. Like he
Waived
got
him.
bounced with Brees and Dalvin being there. Yeah, I thought they had a cool 1-2, and then they just changed that backfield completely. He's produced, like going back to his time with the Jets, like he's produced when on the field. So it's interesting. I like that point. What was the one, or is anything you said the one that you were gonna say earlier, but we're
It was
waiting
Ty
to?
Johnson because
Okay.
you were talking about the run game, and that's what sparked it for me.
Ooh,
Um,
I like that
the
point.
the earliest one, the question that I had for you when I was waiting for segment changes. Do we have any more questions coming up?
No, I was just going to ask you your
Okay,
final
here we
thoughts on the
go.
state of
Here
the
we go.
team, and then we're going to talk about some more things. Oh boy, I'm ready. Question.
Um, given the state of the team, given the state of the Bills,
Uh-oh.
where do you sit on Brandon Beane? Like, do you think he deserves any blame in terms of like, is his seat hot? Like, where do you sit on that? Because personally, I'll tell you where I am. I don't think he deserves as much blame
Hmm.
for things that are going on. Like maybe the Von Miller thing. Like maybe he had a hand in that, in the handling of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in terms of roster construction and like the personnel that he's put together to put this team in a position to succeed, like do you put blame on him, if any? Like where do you stand on that? Because I think he's all right in my eyes.
It's so muddy for me. I'll start with saying this. Like, it's so muddy because I don't know how much of the decision making
Mm,
also is like of Sean McDermott's doing. Like, I don't know who was the one who was pounding the table for Kyrie Elam. Was it a scout? Was it Brandon
mm,
Beane? Was it Sean McDermott? It's also funny going back to like the receipts like on Twitter and stuff of when we were doing draft stuff at that time. And like I have all
dude.
these tweets of being like, I don't like this pick. And it's just funny how it like turned out. I keep finding them in every time I search anything for myself with Trent McDuffie or Roger McCreary, who are both
I
like doing well.
brought a Khalil Shakir jersey into work, and
Ooh,
everyone was like, "Why do you have that jersey?" I was like, "He was my favorite draft pick from that draft class.
and
Like,
he's
my
balling out. I remember
birthday
we
is
were
like the
talking
day of
about
the
it.
draft." Yeah, I was like, not buying a running back jersey because running backs don't even get paid in the NFL.
Mhm.
Not getting Kyrie Elam jersey because he wasn't good. Didn't
Yep,
think Terrell Bernard was gonna
yep.
be a middle linebacker.
We were
Like
talking
he's
about
been
it
a
on
good
that,
surprise, right? But
he has been.
Khalil Shakir was the gem from that draft class the day after the draft was over.
Yes, absolutely. I remember I remember I tweeted it out like, just pretend that Khalil Shakir was the third round pick and Terrell Bernard was
Yeah,
the fifth,
was
and
the fifth
everybody will
round
feel
pick.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's funny. I remember, yeah, we were talking. I think it was day 3 before day 3 started. It was that Saturday morning, and you were like, what jersey, this and that. And we were like, oh, Shakir, because Shakir is awesome.
yep.
So I do wonder, I like this comment here from Bills Are Electric, and it's going to actually, I'll bring it up in a minute because it ties into part of my point with Brandon Beane. So yeah, I don't know how much of it is driven by McDermott, by the scouts, by the coordinators, all any of those pieces. I know Bean gets like the official credit and or blame for any like off the
Yeah,
field move type of piece. But
yeah.
my biggest criticism with him, and it ties into the comment here from Bills Are Electric. He says, Brandon Bean has drafted well lately. He got Dalton Kincaid, Osiris Torrance, Terrell Bernard, James Cook, Christian Benford, etc. My biggest thing with him is just all the misses the Bills have had on day 2. And I feel like that's handicapped or hamstrung their ability to have top end or top tier talent. I did this episode back in February or March, like analyzing all their picks by round, and the misses that they had in rounds 2 and 3 relative to a lot of their competition. It's been significant. And the one example, granted, it's just one example, but like using the Cincinnati Bengals at the time, who like their day 2 picks were, and granted, they're picking a little higher at times because they were worse, but their day 2 picks still T. Higgins and Jesse Bates, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Joe Mixon, Sam Hubbard. Like they have all these hits
Cam
that
Taylor
ended up.
Britt too, right?
Oh, Cam Taylor Britt, good call. He was a second rounder. Like they had all these dudes that ended up becoming like B plus guys that became or A guys that were either core members of their team or played so well they couldn't pay them and they had to go somewhere else. And my biggest criticism with Beane has been those misses in the higher end of the draft, mainly on day 2. Like, and it's ridiculous how you juxtapose it with the success on the back end. Like, I don't care what people think to a certain degree, like on what level of starter, but like Dane Jackson was a tremendous hit for
Yeah.
like a late round guy. Like, and you again talking about the Terrell Bernard piece, 3rd round pick, but like, what's he kind of been? Khalil Shakir, 5th rounder, what you've gotten from him. We were talking about the other day, Gabe Davis. That's a hit. Like, whether you think he's a wide receiver 2 or not, to
Yeah.
get the production you've gotten out of a 4th round wide receiver, cool, that's awesome. He's got all these like back end day 3 successes and has hit less on day 2. Majority of the first round stuff has been solid, aside from Kyer Elam. And I guess, Ed Oliver was kind of thrown in that mix until he started balling out again this year. But my biggest gripe with him has been the misses on day 2 in the draft. And I actually wonder, do I still have no, I don't. I thought I still had the graphic here, like in
No.
saved in one of my overlays for like who, like, because I literally broke
That'd
it
be
down by
funny.
round. Actually, I'm going to try and grab it when I pass it to you to speak. That's been my biggest thing. Like the misses on day 2 in the Brandon Beane era have bothered me a little bit. I don't like the money and the time that they gave for the Dawson Knox contract. I thought of that
Yeah.
before he got hurt. I think of it even more so now. But then also like little things too. Like I feel like they should have done more to reinforce the linebacker position this offseason, but I don't know if that was at Sean McDermott's advisement or not. I know they reached out to Levante David, but at that time, by the time they did, he'd already decided to re-sign with Tampa, so he was going to stay there. Like, I have little one-off nitpick things, but on the whole, no, I think Brandon Beane has done a good job and has like earned his keep as kind of like the roster builder for this team.
Yeah. No, I agree with a lot of that. I mean, I'm going through the draft classes now, kind of looking at them, and God, it's funny. Like Harrison Phillips, like that's a good day 2 pick. He's
Oh,
not
that's
on the
right.
team anymore, right? But a good
No,
day
that's
2
true.
pick. Like Devin Singletary was a good day 2 pick. Dawson Knox was a good day 2 pick. But like now we're looking at Knox's contract, like you said, and figuring out how he fits into this team. I mean, obviously that Knox question will be answered shortly. That's another thing. You know what? That's to this banner that's on the screen right now, improvement coming out of the bye. Like really intrigued to see what Joe Brady is going to do with a 12
Hmm,
personnel offense, right? Like what
right.
is this offense going to look like with Kincaid and Knox on the field? How much does it open up Kincaid? Because I feel like there's honestly a part of Kincaid that we're not getting because there was so much installed this offseason with the
Mm,
idea that he was going to be like in a tight split with inline Dawson Knox, like it was going
hmm
to be a 2-by-2 set, but Knox and Kincaid were going to be on one side and Kincaid was going to be tight split to that. And then it was going to be Davis and Diggs or Shakir and Diggs on the other side. So I think there's still a lot of the offense we actually haven't seen. Um, God, Zach Moss, day 2 pick, like balling out for the Colts. Like,
Bro, I mean, we defended him, and so many people yelled
I
at us.
don't need to say how many Twitter followers I lost because of defending Zach
Oh,
Moss.
they were mad. Oh, boom, and boom, while you were speaking, so I found so here are the Bills day 1 and day 2 draft picks. So round 1, 2, and 3. And look at the misses that you've had in round 2 and 3. Cody Ford, meh, like not at all. AJ Epinesa looks like he's starting to round into form a little bit finally. So I think that
Yeah,
conversation can be more debated a little bit now. Boogie Basham, hard miss.
yeah.
Cook, I like the pick of Cook, but what's frustrating with it is I think he's been a hit so far, but also like look at what you're getting from Latavius Murray and Ty Johnson, who are like claimed off the running back scrap heap. And then it's like, did you really have to spend a round 2 pick on James Cook?
It's
And
the
then you go
running
to
back
round
conversation.
always. And then look at round 3, like Harrison Phillips. I think that was a hit. Singletary, meh. Dawson Knox, meh so far. Knox has been more of a hit than miss, but still meh for me. Moss was a miss here. Spencer Brown has been better this year. I still don't think he's as good as the drum bangers are making him out to be. I'm still going to say that's a miss. And Bernard, well, I think he's been a hit this year. We'll see what
I
he is
think
long term.
I think the thing is though with your round 3, and it's funny because I'm differing a lot on this round 3 assessment specifically. Round 3, I feel like you're analyzing relative to the expectation that they will be B plus or better players,
No,
right?
no.
Oh, okay. No.
I'm just expecting like meaningful contribution
Mm.
and the opportunity to get a second contract. Like
Okay, that's
like
yeah,
so
copy.
like Harrison Phillips for me is a hit because well, one, he played well here.
Yep.
But two, he priced himself out. Like he
Yep.
got paid well to go to Minnesota and was out. Devin Singletary, I consider more of a miss because while I think he was fine here,
Right.
he just got some like 1 year deal to like bounce and peace out otherwise. Like Zach Moss, you traded him away because you thought he wasn't hitting. Spencer Brown has been super mercurial at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Dawson Knox, I think, is still more potential than he is realistic like hitting. But no, I just base it. My main
No, I see what you're saying now. No, no,
yeah.
no, no. I
Day
get.
day one and
Yeah.
day two guys should be it's hard to put a grade, but my expectation for them is to either play well in an ideal world. Day one and day two guys either become a core member of your team in some level. This doesn't mean core member like all pro caliber guy, but they either become a guy that you want to resign or prices themselves out of your price range.
Yeah. Resign for a role or price themselves out. I
Yes.
think that's the issue with Dawson Knox right now is he might have priced himself out and got re-signed.
Yeah. Like that's a little piece there, which is funny. And if you juxtapose that with like what's happened with round 4, like Taron Johnson hit, Gabe Davis hit, round 5, like Saran Neal, good special teamer, but he's a round 5 guy. That's probably a hit. Teller was a miss because they gave up on him. Voshan Joseph is a miss. Fromm's a miss. Doyle's a miss. But then like round 6, McLeod missed because he's not on the team, but he's still doing some things with San Fran.
It's
Jaquan
so
Johnson,
funny how many of these players are hits for other teams.
I know, right? Like even like what
Like
Isaiah
how
Hodgins did a
many
little
players
bit.
the Bills gave up on early because they didn't fit the scheme, whatever it was.
Yeah, like that's a fair point. Like, and it just hitting on anyone here in any way
Yeah.
is successful. Like Benford is obviously probably the biggest hit out of all of it, but I think like Taron Johnson getting like one of the best. Taron Johnson is one of the best nickel corners in all of football. You
He's
got
one
him
of
in the
the
fourth
best
round.
draft picks in the Beane era, in my
Absolutely.
argument.
Considering like where he was taken. Also for those who Khalil Shakir is also in round 5. That's a hit. I'll just before anybody let me put that there just before anybody like jumps on it. Matt Milano technically was not in the Brandon Beane era. So I want to throw
Yeah,
that
we're
out there in
going
case someone's like, well, where's
2018.
correct? Yeah, it's technically still the Doug Whaley part, although we all talk about like
We don't
Beane
know.
kind of knew he was going to get the job, how much Raheem McDermott working together,
Yeah.
kind of under the table, yada yada. But yeah, like they've had just getting any type of anything like in day 3, like even just getting a special teamer, let alone getting like an actual starter in Taron and Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir and Christian Benford, even like Wild Goose balled out a little bit for Washington last year and was like giving you some snaps. Dane Jackson being a 7th rounder and turning into a low tier CB2, high end CB3, like what you've gotten from some of these like dudes, Tyler Bass becoming like a very good kicker. Like there's definitely been misses mixed into it, but like their hits on day 3 have been like significant from what they've gotten compared to what like where they were taken type of piece versus what they haven't gotten out of again those friggin' round 2 and round 3 guys on day 2. Like that's been my biggest criticism of Beane. Like is just but again, I don't know how much I can lay at his feet because if I don't know, maybe Sean McDermott is sitting there pounding the table going like, I love Cody Ford. We got to get Cody Ford. And it's like, all right, cool. Like, coach, you think you can make it work? Cool. Let's get Cody Ford. Or there's a position coach, right? Like, I don't know, maybe like the DB's coach is like, yo, Kyrie Elam is the truth. We have to get Kyrie Elam. And it's like, all right, you know, cool. I trust you. I'm going to do it. Like, I know
Yeah.
Beane is at
Yeah,
the end of
it's
the day
tough to.
signs off on it. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to know where to assign blame completely. And again, like, he at the end of the day he signs off on it and it like happens on his watch, but I don't know how much comes, you know, it falls at his feet positively or negatively. But to answer your question like fully, yeah,
Yeah.
my biggest gripe is just the misses that they've had on day 2 because I think their day 2 is where you can still get dudes who offer you like good starting caliber players and
Yep.
they haven't done that enough. They've either drafted poorly or they've drafted too much at non-premium positions, and either way it hasn't been successful.
Yeah, no, I can definitely echo that. But now that you brought up like 2018 since with all the draft broken down, I definitely think what you said is fair, but I think I look at the draft less and I look at free agency more and some of the misses in free agency. I
Yeah,
think
that's fair.
he's definitely had some hits. I mean, you look at Daquan Jones specifically, but I mean, just this offseason, like we knew there was going to be a wide receiver makeup and Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy have just not been it. And I understand it was not a good wide receiver market this
No.
offseason. Like we were not going to pay Jacoby Myers what Jacoby Myers got. Like, that was never going to happen.
No, but bro, I would have given him that in a heartbeat. Like, he is worth $11 million a year.
Sure,
Man.
but I don't think there was a world that the Bills would have done that.
Oh,
I
no.
just don't see that as the realm of possibility. But then you see what I mean. Obviously, it's nothing compared to that. But what we spent on Hardy and Sherfield, and it's like these guys are shells of themselves. Like, Hardy is not what he was in New Orleans, and Sherfield seemed to have been schemed up really well in Miami because
Yeah.
it's not
Oh,
happening in
man.
Buffalo, right? Like,
And
he
then
was always open in
oh,
Miami.
for sure. And Tim Settle hasn't been great.
No.
You've had that miss there. Like, even before Rapp got, like, Taylor Rapp has been, like, kind of up and down.
Yeah,
I'm looking at
that was to me that was like a
just
DeMar Hamlin, like,
fair.
aging safeties
But
kind
then
of
also you
signing.
get,
Like, we
like,
need some depth there. So
fair, but you juxtapose that with, like, what he did with Leonard Floyd and Rasul Douglas, and then it's like, "Oh my god, what amazing
exactly. It
deals."
kind of
Like,
levels itself out,
it's tough,
So
like,
it's really tough to say, oh, he needs to go. So I
that's
think
fair.
for
No.
me, he's not in a position where his seat's warm.
No, I think on the whole, again, it's hard to, like, hit in the draft and in free
Yeah,
agency. I think it's easier to hit in free agency because there's more known quantity in terms of what a player could be at the NFL level.
right.
But yeah, I think on the whole, like, he's done well. I think he's put together a good team. Again, I think on the whole, both he and Sean McDermott have done well. Like, there's
Right.
a
Yeah,
reason why,
objectively.
like, the Bills have won 3 straight division championships, and again, even too, like, we could have seen they had a bunch of wild, stupid things happen in 2019 against the Texans. Like, they could have been a Final Four team that year too. Like, this has been
Yeah.
like a successful franchise in their stead, as they've been righting the ship. So I think, yeah, on the whole, like, you don't get to have the wins consistently. And again, I know there's been bottoming out in the playoffs, but you're not a consistent double-digit win team consistently threatening for the 1 seed in a conference. You're not doing that unless you're, like, well coached to some degree and well built from a roster standpoint. Like, and again, I have had, this is a conversation for another time, but you and I have had the conversations where, like, I've told you, like, what, like, the issues I've had with this team from a roster building standpoint, and that what I think is holding them back. But even with me having that, again, like, on the whole, this has still been a successful
Still
franchise
successful.
because,
Right.
yeah, 1,000% because of what they've been. Kendall, some parting words for everyone, as we start to, throwing up the banner, but we're not taken out just yet. Kendall, just overall, give us your final thoughts on the state of this team going forward. Where your head is at when it comes to the Bills, and what you think they're going to be going forward, and what the rest of the season will hold.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how the season pans out because it'll give us a lot of answers towards, like, what we really want to see this off season. I mean, me, I'm really off season centric. As much as I love what's going on in season, I really love what happens in the off season. So I'm excited to see, the evaluation and how the rest of the season pans out. But I mean, I think my parting words are really, no one can beat this team but themselves, and we've seen that this year really come to fruition. Like, this Bills team can beat absolutely anyone in the league, all 32 teams, because they can beat themselves. It sucks to say that, but that's the life that we're in right now. And hopefully they don't beat themselves the rest of the year. Hopefully they can string it together, win 5 straight, and we get to see some playoffs. Because, yeah, I agree with you, man. I think if the Bills win 5 straight, no one wants to see the Bills because they will be going into the playoffs hot, and everyone knows what Josh Allen can do when he's hot.
Absolutely. Like, this season is so dumb. I hate it in so many ways. I'm trying to find, like, little silver linings. Like, well, if they don't make the playoffs, like, I can start college prospect scouting early, and I can nail everybody in the Senior Bowl down, and, like, do all these pieces. Like, yeah, it's man, it's been, like, one weird season, and I'm like chomping at the bit to see what they look like coming out of the bye, because Kansas City has kind of had their number, but the Bills have also had Kansas City's number, like, from a regular season standpoint, and have looked good against them, beating them. Like, this Bills team can easily run the table and finish 11-6 easily. They could also easily lose like 4 of 5, if not all of them. Like, it's just, you got to see what team you're going to get week in and week out. And I'm wondering, how storybook is this year in terms of, are we, watching this from noon to 6 on Super Bowl Sunday, and the story is running like, oh, the Bills team that was 6-6, wins 5 straight, and new offensive coordinator, and turning things around, and blah, blah, blah. Like, all the storybook. All the storybook elements that kind of exist. I'm still thinking back to, when I forget who they brought in, but when the Ravens won it in Ray Lewis's last year, they fired Cam Cameron mid-season, and I forget who they brought, or did they fire Kendall, look up
I'm looking.
that look at damn, hold on, I can't now do it without Baltimore Ravens.
2000 Ravens?
No, it was the no, the one that beat the Niners in the Super Bowl.
Oh,
So
2012.
the 2012 Baltimore Ravens. Bang.
Jim Caldwell and Cam Cameron.
Who did they I forget, who did they fire and who got fired and who got brought in?
I don't know.
I think they fired Cam Cameron.
And brought in
Oh,
Caldwell. Yeah, I don't know which one's which. They're just both listed on PFR. I don't think there's a way to get detail
what good
for
are
which
you?
one.
Yes.
I don't think
Yes.
there's a way to get the
So,
detail for which
no,
one's
I got it.
first.
I looked it up. Cam Cameron was fired on December 10th. And they named Jim Caldwell OC, and then they ended up winning the Super Bowl. So I keep thinking back to that year and being like, oh, because that ended up being a huge story. Like, oh, this team, and Ray Lewis tore his tricep and then maybe used like deer antler spray to come back. Like all this like weird stuff happened. And then they ran the gauntlet and ended up winning the Super Bowl. So maybe we'll get something like that. But yeah, it's been an absolutely wild year. Speaking of wild, from a good standpoint, One Pie Pizza, sponsor of the show. I bring it up at different points based on the week. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Delicious sweet sauce pizza, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. They are tremendous in every way, shape, and form. And like I talk about all the time, they do good in the community as well. And I wanted to share Toys for Tots, what they got going on right now. So drop an unwrapped gift into their Toys for Tots donation box and receive an entry to win one of many great prizes. A couple of the prizes are just listed there. So special dinner package, Sabres memorabilia, pizza for a year. They've also got Bills stuff going on. Like I'm talking like memorabilia with like signed helmets and jerseys, different Sabres pieces as well. And then got like literally like a ton of other prizes as well. Last year there were 6 or 7 Toys for Tots boxes, and by the time it was all said and done, like all 7 were filled up. They ended up having to get a couple more to meet all the demand for the toys that went through. So go get yourself some One Pie Pizza, treat your taste buds and yourself and the family to the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and do some good for the community as well. I love the holidays. I love Christmas. I love Thanksgiving, especially love Christmas, but it's not always like the best thing for a lot of people. So do some good for some people if you can and help them out. Or if you just want to be selfish, give a toy so you can potentially win a prize. Whatever gets donations to people, I'm down for. That's One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that will do it for us here on this show. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks. We've gone for over 2 hours. I didn't think we were going to go this long, but hey, whatever. Like State of the Bills, it's a large, nuanced, contextual conversation. Before anyone leaves, if you're still here riding live with us, and we have a significant amount of you, if you haven't already, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If you're not watching live and you're watching later, that's cool. Please, and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool as well. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever have you. Rate and review and subscribe. Subscribe to Disguise Coverage here on YouTube as well, if you'd be so kind, and then to the Cover One channel as a whole. We have you covered every single day of the week when it comes to a variety of Bills coverage and analysis, depending on what you're looking for. In-depth, more surface level, variety of pieces found here at Cover One. I appreciate all the kind words that are coming through in the chat as we wrap up here. Thank you very much. Also, thank you to everybody who rode with us live here on this episode. I did not know what the appetite would be for an episode coming off of a bye week, or coming into the bye week and coming off a loss. This season is like we've talked about, has been so black in a variety of ways. So I didn't know what the attendance would be, what the engagement would be, but the live chat was popping and absolutely tremendous. I probably could have just done an episode purely off of the live chat and the questions and the back and forth with everything. It was tremendously engaging. So thank you very much to everybody who rode with us live on this episode. It was greatly appreciated. I always say too, is like, I know Kendall joined towards the back end, but especially when I'm riding solo, it's awesome to have a popping and jumping off chat, so I don't feel like I'm doing this alone, which is awesome. So thank you to everybody in the live chat. If you are not watching live and you're watching later, that's cool too. Again, thank you for your view, your listen, your download, live or not. It's greatly appreciated by myself and the entire team. Word of mouth is always good as well. So if you enjoyed this episode, tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is. If you thought this show was terrible, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. Thank you again, everybody who tuned in live, not live, whatever have you. Thank you very much to Kendall for joining me again. Second time in 3 weeks. It's nice to get the band back together here and there.
Of
As
course,
we,
yeah,
it was awesome. You were tremendous as always. You're getting a bunch of love in the chat. You're a celebrity around
appreciate
here,
it, guys.
yeah.
I know,
Everybody,
right? All you
yeah.
have to do is go away for a little bit.
Right? It's absence makes the heart grow fonder. That's exactly what it is. And yeah, but you crushed it. This episode kind of came together late today. I was like putting things together and I just text you out of the blue, given like how kind of free reign I thought the episode would be. And so again, I appreciate you joining me, taking the time. This was awesome. Kendall, you crushed it. The chat crushed it. Again, drop a like on this video if you folks would be so kind. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I hope you had a good holiday and a good Thanksgiving. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. It's delicious. The best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Make sure you get the blue cheese with it because it's homemade and absolutely amazing. Drop off some toys for tots while you are there. Also, One Pie Pizza does breakfast pizza as well, and it's phenomenal. So if that's, kind of your fancy, feel free to get at them for that. That's going to do it for us here on this episode of Disguise Coverage. I will see you tomorrow night, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, for an episode of the Cover One Film Room with Eric Turner as we dive into Bills Eagles. So I will see some of you folks there. If not, I will see you next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of Disguise Coverage. And until then, that'll do it for us here. I like the comment from J-Dub saying getting some Kendall exclusive vibes. Way to tie it in with you being like Bruce exclusive. No face, keeping it anonymous. Appreciate you folks. Stay safe. Be kind to one another. I'll see you next week. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.